Skyrim is a world that feels alive. Cities are filled with people, roads are travelled, and even the most dangerous places usually have something or someone waiting for you. There's movement, noise, a constant sense that life is happening all around you. But not everywhere. Some places feel forgotten, some characters feel left behind, and the more time you spend in Skyrim, the more you start to notice them. The quiet corners of the map where nothing changes, and the NPCs who exist without connection, without purpose, or sometimes without anyone at all. They're not always important, they're not always part of major quests, but they leave an impression for a different reason. Because in a world this full, their silence stands out the most. You've probably passed it, nestled on the craggy slopes of the Reach, between the grandeur of Markarth and the misty borders of the northwest, sits a settlement that barely makes a sound. No guards patrol it, no grand quests revolve around it. Most players barely spend 5 minutes there, and yet it has a name, Whiterun. It sounds like it should matter, like it once mattered, but that it just doesn't anymore. This is the story of a town caught between ghosts and gold, a place with no Jarl, no glory, and no future. This place could possibly be the loneliest city in all of Skyrim. You don't stumble upon Whiterun with any fanfare. There's no radiant quest that pushes you towards it, no courier handing you a letter, no urgent rumour whispered in a tavern. You just arrive. 3 buildings, 2 smelters, some tired workers, and 2 mines that no one seems eager to enter. It doesn't look ruined, but it feels like it should be. The architecture is still intact, the land isn't cursed, and yet Whiterun gives off the quiet melancholy of a place that was forgotten while still being lived in. The trees feel like they're listening. The stones remember more than the people actually do. Skyrim is a land defined by borders, political, divine, cultural, and almost every major location fits neatly into a faction. Markarth belongs to the Silverbloods, Whiterun serves as the battleground for the Civil War, Winterhold clings to the College for relevance. But Whiterun, it's not really claimed by anyone. Technically, it is still part of the Reach, but it has no governance, no steward, no guards. It's a free town in a game that rarely allows places to exist without ownership. And that's its first danger, because when no one protects you, anyone can, and someone did. If you visit at the right time, you'll walk into the middle of a heated argument between the town's leader, Einethach, with 2 Silverblood mercenaries. They want control of the mine. They say it's always belonged to their family. Einethach insists otherwise. There's no resolution without you. You're the deciding factor, and no matter what you choose, whether you let the Silverbloods take over or drive them away, the game just moves on. The mercenaries leave, or they don't. Einethach thanks you, or he doesn't. But the mine keeps operating, the people keep working, and no one ever really speaks of it again. Even in victory, Whiterun remains voiceless. There are 2 mines in Whiterun. Both are small, both are basic, and yet both are worked by a handful of weary NPCs who seem like they haven't left in years. There's no hidden treasure, no buried artifact, just iron, silver, and exhaustion. What makes it unsettling isn't the danger, it's the mundanity of it all. Every miner here talks like someone halfway to giving up, just trying to make ends meet, hope the Silverbloods don't come back. You're not in a battlefield, you're in a holding pattern. Whiterun isn't dying, it's enduring, and that might just be worse than death. If this town were to have a heart, it's Einethach, a Reachman by blood, a Nord by survival. He owns the mines, oversees the town, and keeps the peace. But the game never lets him become more than that. He has no family, no political reach, no alliances. He's a good man in a bad position, trying to hold on to a settlement no one respects, in a region ruled by people who want him gone. Even if you help him, he fades back into his loop. He wakes, he walks, he worries. Like the town itself, Einethach is both vital and invisible. The Reach has always been a contested territory. The Forsworn attack from the hills, the Stormcloaks want Markarth, the Imperials want to hold it. And Karthwasten? Karthwasten just waits. It never gets attacked, no Forsworn raids, no Civil War battles, no dragons to send. You'd think that makes it peaceful, which it does, but doesn't at the same time. It makes it kind of empty. Because the quiet here doesn't come from its safety, it comes from its irrelevance and its isolation. Skyrim's wars pass over Karthwasten not out of mercy, but out of indifference. Even the game forgets it exists, and that makes it even more lonely than it already is. Lore nerds know the name Karth shows up elsewhere: Karth Spire, Karth River, Old Roldan. The name has history, and in older Elder Scrolls lore, Karthwasten was once a thriving trading post, a site of importance. That's not really what we see in Skyrim, however. We see the remnants, the dust, the outline of what it might have once been. There are no ruins, but there are echoes. There are only 3 buildings. The way the mine's positioned, the absence of a central building. It feels like a city that once had a spine, and now it's just kind of a ribcage. And the game never says why. It just leaves you here to feel it. Most towns in Skyrim have a shrine, or at least an altar, a symbol of belief, a thread to the divine, but not in this town. Despite its long-standing name, despite its proximity to the ancient Reachman traditions, despite the weight of myth and blood in its soil, there are no gods here. No Talos, no Kine, just rocks, wind, and people too tired to ask for help from anyone, mortal or divine. It's spiritual silence, and in a game that's built on so many prophecies, that kind of silence is deafening. More importantly, even though Karthwasten is a small town, there's a child, a daughter. She has no dialogue, no schedule, no story. Well, because she's not there. She was kidnapped by the Forsworn with her parents longing over her return. And that might just be the most tragic thing of all about Karthwasten. Because every other child in Skyrim either dreams of something greater or fears something worse. If you look at any other child playing in Solitude, or in Dawnstar, or in Riften, they're having fun. They're running around and they don't worry about anything. But this girl, well, she's gone. She doesn't know there's anything else, and no one teaches her otherwise. Even though Karthwasten does appear on your map, it doesn't lead you anywhere. There's no radiant bounty here. No courier will send you back. You won't be told to find a lost artifact in its mine, and no companion will say, let's stop in Karthwasten. It's a name on a map that means literally nothing after you click it. Yes, there are a few quests that do bode as some excitement, but however, the isolation of it all makes it different from every other major settlement. Because at least when you forget Roekstead, the game still reminds you. However, Karthwasten never calls you back, not even to say goodbye. But the pieces are all there. A Reachman leader caught between cultures, a town without allegiance, a mine at the centre of a power struggle, a child with no voice, and a legacy erased. It could have been a Forsworn stronghold, or a hub for rebel miners, or a haven for those caught between the war. But it's none of those. It's a village that the narrative drives past, a branch in the road that no one chooses, and that's what makes it so powerful. Because Skyrim is a world of chosen ones, and Karthwasten reminds you of the people that were left behind. Karthwasten isn't abandoned, but it might as well be. It breathes, it functions, it exists, but it doesn't live. And in a game where most towns scream for attention, through quests, through music, through blood, Karthwasten just sits in the hills and waits for someone to remember it, for something to happen, and for the silence to break. But it never does, and that, more than any monster or mystery, is what lingers. Because sometimes the scariest thing in a fantasy world is the town that the story forgets. In Skyrim, everyone has a job. Merchants sell things, guards say things, and Jarls sit on chairs and argue about things. Even Fandel in Riverwood has a job. He walks back and forth between a stump and a woodpile, chopping firewood forever, as if his AI brain is powered by splinters. But the point is, they all matter. If you pop open the console, click on an NPC and peek behind the curtain, you'll see it. Faction tags, daily routines, AI packages, dialogue trees. Every NPC is plugged into the machine. They're little gears in a very large, very buggy medieval clock. Every NPC except one. She doesn't talk much, she doesn't sell anything. She has no family, no town, no meaningful connection to any questline. She doesn't even have a real name, just a first name, one word. But she's always there, in every playthrough, in the exact same place, waiting. South of Falkreath, past the Black Lake and through a chokehold of pines, you'll find her. You have to want to get there. There's no main road, no quest marker. Just wander far enough into the mountains and the trees start crowding in. The music cuts out, snow starts to fall. You see wolves instead of bandits. You pass into that kind of quiet only Skyrim can do. The kind that feels like the rest of the game has forgotten to follow you. And then you see the cabin. It's not haunted, not on fire, not swarming with cultists or vampires or necromancers with names like Zaril the Blackened. It's just a cabin. A little wooden bridge over a stream, some practice dummies. It's all very peaceful. And outside the cabin, bow on her back, calm expression on her face, is her, Angie. She says hello. You say hello back. And then she just exists. At first glance, Angie seems straightforward. She offers to teach you how to shoot a bow. It's simple. Hit the targets, get some free arrows, earn a few skill points. She even tells you a little bit about herself. Her parents were killed by the Thalmor. She came out here to live alone, and she wants to be left in peace. It's a neat little detour, a side activity like mining ore or finding a weird bug in a jar. But once you finish her archery training, that's it. No follow-up quest, no new dialogue. She doesn't become a new follower. You can't marry her, you can't send her to one of your Hearthfire homes to be your personal archer in residence. She doesn't even acknowledge you after that. You train with her, she says thanks, and then she just goes back to standing, like nothing happened at all. Skyrim is full of self-contained characters. Froki living in a cave with his grandson, the ghost of old Rolden Inn, the skeleton sitting at a dinner table on top of a mountain for no reason at all. But even these oddballs usually tie into something else. A quest, a Daedric artifact, a Radiant event, a weird joke. Angie doesn't. She's not part of any faction. No one mentions her. She never leaves her cabin. She has no enemies, no allies, no story arc. She's a rock in the stream. The water just flows around her. Which begs the question, why is she here at all? If you dig into the creation kit, the dusty attic of Bethesda's imagination, you start to find traces. Angie's cabin is flagged as a player safe house, which is rare. The tag means you can sleep there, store items, live there, and the game won't eventually reset or eat your loot. But Skyrim never tells you this. There's no note on the table, no mention in dialogue, no fast travel icon. Bethesda created a whole safe house and then didn't put up a welcome mat. It's like they built the skeleton of something bigger and then just stopped. Maybe she was supposed to be a follower. Maybe she had a role in a cut questline about Thalmor or the Civil War. There's a line in her dialogue about fearing she'll be hunted, but the threat never comes. No one is looking for her, and no one even knows she's there. Bethesda laid down the bricks, then they went to lunch and never came back. Naturally, the community did what it always does when Bethesda leaves a thread hanging. They started knitting sweaters out of it. Some people think Angie was part of a lost faction, maybe a surviving blade or an offshoot of the Dark Brotherhood. Her archery skills, her isolation, the whole mysterious woman in the woods vibe, it kind of just fits. Others say that she was part of a scrapped mentor system. You'd find NPCs who trained you over time, like Aethys with one-handed, but maybe the system was buggy or half-finished, and Angie is just the last remnant. And then there's my favourite theory. Angie is a ghost. Think about it. She never eats, she never sleeps, she never leaves her property. She speaks in soft, static lines that never change. If you kill her, and you can, there's no bounty. No one reacts. It's like the game doesn't acknowledge her existence at all. Like she's already dead, just lingering. In Skyrim, we're trained to evaluate NPCs like vending machines. Can I marry them? Can they follow me? Do they give me loot, XP, a quest? Angie doesn't do any of that. She gives you a few arrows and some advice, and then she's done. Which is probably why most players forget about her. She's not marked, she's not repeated, she's not important. But maybe there's a point. Maybe she exists precisely because she doesn't do anything. Because in a world that's constantly handing you objectives, Angie is just present. No monster to slay, no dialogue wheel to grind through, no skill tree to max out. She's a human moment in the game of godhood. And that might just be the rarest thing in all of Skyrim. Angie is lonely, but not in the dramatic violin swell kind of way. Skyrim doesn't really do that. Her loneliness is quieter than that. It's in the silence after she stops talking. It's in the second bed that no one sleeps in. It's in the way she just stands there, all day, not doing much of anything. Not waiting, not watching, just existing in a space that no one else ever bothers to visit. And it's not the sad kind of lonely either. Well, not exactly. It's just the absence of things. Of movement, of conversation, of purpose. Skyrim is full of NPCs with routines and routes and radiant quests that make them feel alive. Angie has none of that. She's not part of the story, she's the pause between stories, the breath you take before fast travelling somewhere louder. And once you notice it, once you feel that quiet hanging around her, it sticks with you. We all know loneliness is baked into Skyrim. You're the Dragonborn, the Chosen One. You're everywhere and nowhere at once, saving towns, toppling kings, talking to gods. And yet somehow you're always a little bit apart. You're not from here, you're through here. And every now and then you meet someone who feels the same. Angie is one of them. She doesn't want to help, she doesn't want glory. She's not waiting for a hero to solve her problems. She just wants to be left alone. You can join her for a while, sleep in the spare bed, sit by the fire, practice your aim. But eventually you'll leave, and she'll still be there, in the same spot watching the snowfall. Or maybe not watching at all, maybe she's just existing. Skyrim is a loud game. Dragons, dungeons, shouting people off cliffs. But every once in a while, it whispers. And sometimes it whispers in the form of a woman in the woods who wants nothing from you, gives you nothing grand and leaves you with nothing but a question. Maybe Angie doesn't do anything. Maybe she just is. And maybe in a world built on utility, that's the most remarkable thing of all. In a game like Skyrim, it's easy to overlook the quiet people. The world is filled with shouting Nords, storming battle mages, and ancient dragons clawing their way out of time. Cities burn, Jarls scheme, and you, the player, are usually at the centre of it all. But if you ever stop sprinting from one quest marker to the next, if you wander off the beaten path, sometimes the world lets you find something else. Something forgotten. And something small. Not magical, not dangerous, just quiet and strange. If you walk through the mountains, you will come across him, in his little shack, isolated in the hills. And that's what might make him the loneliest NPC in all of Skyrim. Froki's shack is exactly what it sounds like. A tiny wooden structure half collapsed and huddled against the cliffs in the southern mountains of Skyrim. It isn't near a road, it isn't near a town. It isn't even on the way to anything, really. There's no marker, no reason to come here. Just stone, snow, and silence. If you do find it, it's probably by accident. Maybe you were scaling the cliffs looking for the Shrine of Talos. Maybe you were chasing a fox through the trees. Maybe, like me, you were just bored of fast travelling and wanted to see what lived in the margins of the map. And then you see it. A shack, a fire, some smoke. A sign that someone actually still lives up here. Froki is an old Nord, grey-haired, worn. He greets you with suspicion, like someone who stopped trusting visitors a long time ago. He wears simple clothes, no armour, no rings. He's not a quest giver in the traditional sense. He doesn't beg for help or praise your accomplishments. He just sits near the fire watching the wind cut through the trees. But if you talk to him, if you really stay for a while, you'll learn that Froki used to be something more. A hunter, a soldier, a worshipper of the old gods. A man who once fought for Skyrim, but who gave up on it a long time ago. He's one of the only living followers of Kyne, the ancient goddess of the storm and sky, and he teaches her ways to his grandson, Hamming. But that's right, Froki isn't entirely alone, is he? But it still feels like he is. If you've ever played Skyrim from the start, Hamming might sound familiar. He's one of the first NPCs you ever meet, a child from Helgen who survives the dragon attack at the beginning of the game. You see him escape with his father as the town crumbles. And then nothing. His father disappears, his home is gone, and Hamming is never really mentioned again. Unless, of course, you find this shack. Because this is where he ended up, living with his grandfather in the middle of nowhere. No books, no toys, no friends, just a half-burnt shack, some hunting lessons, and the howling wind. Skyrim doesn't tell you what happened to his father. The game doesn't really care. And maybe that's what makes it worse, because it's not just Froki who's lonely, it's the boy too. Two forgotten characters stitched together by absence. And maybe that's why Froki always seems so angry. Froki doesn't like you. Not at first, anyway. He doesn't trust the companions, he doesn't believe in the 9 divines, and he especially doesn't believe in the Empire. To Froki, Skyrim lost its way when it forgot about the old gods, when it traded the wildness of Kyne for the bureaucracy of the divines. He sees the modern world as weak, corrupt, disconnected from the land. He speaks in quiet, judgmental tones, not bitter, exactly, just disappointed. It's easy to write him off as another cranky old Nord, but if you listen closely, Froki's anger is grief. He's mourning a Skyrim that no longer exists, a time when men lived in the mountains, prayed to the sky, and didn't need thrones or temples to find meaning. That world is gone, and so Froki left the world with it. Or maybe the world left him. If you earn Froki's respect, usually by showing interest in Kyne, he gives you a quest. But not a normal one, no kill this bandit or fetch this artifact. Instead, he tells you to visit Kyne's sacred shrines and hunt the guardian spirits that dwell there. It's a simple task, go to another remote hill, fight a ghost animal, and then return. But the journey takes you across the wildest parts of Skyrim, deep forests, hidden cliffs, forgotten glades. And every time you fight one of Kyne's guardians, you realise something. These aren't really evil spirits. They're not threats. They're sacred. They're symbols of the natural world, proud, powerful, and ancient. You're not killing monsters. You're proving that you understand them. And when you return to Froki, he doesn't cheer. He just nods. Like you've finally learned something he's known for decades. Talking about Froki's home, it isn't cozy. The walls are crooked, the floor is cracked, there's no food on the table, no clutter, no warmth. There are almost no visitors except for myself and other players. No signs of trade, no books, no notes, no letters. Froki doesn't even have 2 beds, one for him and one for his grandson. So I'm assuming they sleep in the one bed. But maybe Froki's shack wasn't meant to last. Maybe it was meant to be temporary, a place of exile, or pilgrimage, or mourning. But years passed, and the world didn't ask for him to return. So he didn't. That's the question that lingers, long after you leave. Did Froki really choose this? Did he walk away from civilization because he believed in something greater? A forgotten god? A purer way of life? Or did he lose everything and build his life out of the ruins? We'll never really know, will we? Skyrim doesn't really give us any answer to this. Froki doesn't have a good backstory quest or a personal journal or a friend who speaks about him in town. He is utterly and completely disconnected from the rest of the game. And in a world where everything is usually tied together, from Daedric cults to court intrigues, that kind of disconnection is rare, because it almost feels real. People like Froki exist. People who lose faith in the world, who retreat, who vanish into the hills. Not because they hate people, but because they've been hurt by them too many times. Froki's not a villain. He's not even a hermit. He's just tired. Froki doesn't die in a grand battle. He doesn't leave behind a powerful weapon or a buried secret. When the game ends, he's still there. Still sitting by the fire, still raising a boy who lost his home. Still praying to a god no one remembers. And maybe that's what makes him the loneliest NPC in Skyrim. Not because he's alone, but because he's untouched and unclaimed by any major questline, any war, and any epic conclusion. He exists entirely outside the game's design, which means Froki isn't really here for the player. He's here for himself. Froki's shack isn't a dungeon. It's not a shrine. It's not even marked on most maps. It's just a shack, a house, in the mountains, slowly decaying under the snow. But it holds something that most places in Skyrim don't. Stillness. Not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of grief, of memory and of choice. Because Froki isn't a forgotten character. He's a character who chose to forget the world. And somehow, that's kind of more haunting. The wind never stops blowing around his home, the fire never quite warms the room, and the boy, Hamming, never says much of anything. But they're there, together, waiting for something that probably won't come. Maybe kind, maybe peace, maybe nothing. And as you leave Froki's shack and the snow begins to swallow the roof behind you, you might realise you weren't really meant to find him. But now that you have, you won't forget him. In a game like Skyrim, it's easy to overlook the quiet places. You're usually too busy slaying dragons, shouting enemies off cliffs, or watching entire cities crumble under civil war. But sometimes, if you stop rushing from quest marker to quest marker, you'll find something different. Not dangerous, not magical, just different. It's an inn, a simple wooden inn, like dozens of others scattered across Skyrim, but this one is different. Because so few come here, no one needs it, and yet it's still here, waiting. This is Nightgate Inn, and it might just be the loneliest place in all of Skyrim. Nightgate Inn is located in the snowy nowhere between Windhelm and Dawnstar. It's not near a city, it's not even near a road, it sits awkwardly in the wilderness, tucked between snowbanks and crumbling trees like someone plopped it into the world and forgot to connect it to anything. You won't find any guards here, no shopkeepers, no children running around, just the wind, the snow, and a single man behind the counter. His name is Hadreen. He runs the place, though it's never quite clear why. Let's talk about what makes this place so strange. First of all, I would like to point out that the inn, while it's out of the way from a lot of the Skyrim world, it did help me in some ways as I was making the perilous journey from Whiterun to Winterhold, for no apparent reason other than the fact that I was bored and didn't want to fast travel like everyone else. The inn made for a great resting stop as a blizzard started to kick up and my horse began to believe it was a bad idea to keep going. But anyway, in Skyrim, inns serve a purpose. In Whiterun, the Banned Mare is filled with locals, mercenaries, and travellers. In Riften, the Bee and Barb is packed with shady characters and drunks. They are social spaces, alive with conflict, conversation, and narrative potential. But Nightgate Inn? Nightgate Inn is silent. When you enter, there's no music. Just the low hum of a fire pit and the occasional cough from the man behind the bar. Sometimes a few NPCs will be there. The orc who basically just stays in the cellar every day, and Full Theme, an old man who basically also lives there as well, even though he complains about it 24/7. This place does feel like a hiding spot. like it wasn't made for comfort. Comparing this to Whiterun's Inn, the Bennard Mare, in which you walk in and are immediately greeted by a man drumming or playing the flute, and more than one person sitting down. Nightgate Inn just seems like one of those ghost towns you'd find in the middle of the American desert. The main room of the inn gives off a vibe that it hasn't seen more than 20 people in the last few years, and that's what gives it such an odd vibe. This is where it gets weirder. There is no town around Nightgate Inn, no village, no associated mine, no travellers. It's not near a trade route, there's nothing to support it, and to be honest, the only reason I found it was because I was making the journey from Whiterun to Winterhold through the mountains. Most inns in Skyrim are placed where they make sense. Riverwood has one because it's a lumber town, Ivarstead has one because it's at the foot of the 7,000 steps. But Nightgate, it's the middle of nothing, which raises the question, why does this building actually exist? And who was it really meant to serve? But we don't really get an answer, not in the game, not in the dialogue, and not in the lore. You could argue that it's for hunters or passerbys, but even that feels like a stretch. There are almost no random encounters nearby, no patrols, no carriages, no foot traffic. However, there's the odd chance that you do end up passing by a trio of people travelling to another town through the mountains. But you have to go out of your way to find this place, and when you do, it feels like you weren't supposed to be here at all, like the world forgot to erase it. Let's talk about Hadring. He's the innkeeper. He has a little family who he talks about in his dialogue. He mostly only talks about how the inn was built by his great-grandad. No backstory and no apparent life outside of this single room. He's voiced by a generic Nord voice actor and says a few polite lines, but nothing more than what's prompted. And yet, he's always here, always behind the counter, as if he's waiting for something. He doesn't comment on dragons, or the war, or the death of the Emperor. Even though the world is collapsing, he just says, "Let me know if you need anything." And somehow, that's worse. It's one thing for a place to be somewhat abandoned. It's another for it to pretend it's still functioning, even when it clearly isn't. Nightgate Inn isn't just empty. It's worse than that. It's hollow. Here's the thing. Skyrim is a massive world. It's full of detailed cities, scripted quest hubs, branching dialogues. But there are also fragments, leftover corners, unexplored ideas, half-buried concepts that never really got finished. And Nightgate Inn might be one of them. It could have been meant for something bigger, a town that never got built, a quest line that was cut, a hub that lost its context. But instead of deleting it, Bethesda left it in, fully furnished, lightly populated, and completely detached from everything else. It's like finding a chair in an empty warehouse. You sit in it, but you can't shake the feeling that you weren't meant to. But most importantly, the Nightgate Inn probably just acts as a rest stop for any traveller who dares to go through the mountains. And that makes it one of the most remarkable places in Skyrim. A place that was built to house people, but houses almost no one. But who was Hadring before all this? There's no quest about Hadring and no journal. But this absence invites questions. Who is this man really? And why did he choose this place? We know that his great-grandad founded this inn. But given no one ever comes here, except for the Orc and Fulltheme, why would he stay? Hadring could have run an inn in any major hold. Inns are always needed in cities like Solitude or Riften. Instead, he chose to live alone in a snow-blanketed ruin of a road, serving close to no one. Even bandits don't wander in. That's not bad business, that's intentional isolation. Maybe this place wasn't always empty. Maybe there was once a nearby lumber camp or a mountain pass that got buried. Maybe Hadring stayed behind when everyone else left. Or maybe he was sent here in exile, a punishment disguised as hospitality. He never complains, he never asks for help, he just waits, every day and every hour. Waiting for customers who never come, selling food no one eats, making beds no one sleeps in. And maybe, just maybe, he prefers it that way. Nightgate Inn might not be haunted by ghosts, but Hadring himself feels like one. A remnant of a forgotten purpose, a man who chose silence when the world had too much noise. What's truly eerie about Nightgate Inn is that you, the player, are often its first real visitor in years. When you walk in, nothing special happens. There's no cutscene, no quest marker. Just the quiet acknowledgement that you've stumbled into a place that rarely sees visitors. And that's where the discomfort begins. Because Skyrim is a game of recognition. Walk into Whiterun and people know your name. Bards sing about your exploits. Enemies run from your shouts. But at Nightgate Inn, no one knows you. No one even seems to care that you're there. It's like the world pauses, or maybe forgets you exist while you're inside. This makes Nightgate one of the few places in the game where your power means absolutely nothing. You could be the Dragonborn, or the listener of the Brotherhood, and Hadring still just shrugs and offers you a bed. And maybe that's why this place feels so lonely. Not because who's in it, but because of what it strips away from you. The attention, the purpose, the noise. For a few minutes, you're not a hero or a killer. You're just another quiet guest in a place that's trying to forget. Nightgate Inn isn't haunted. It isn't magical. There's no big twist, no boss fight, no secret treasure. It's just lonely. A perfectly good building, fully staffed with food, drinks, and beds. And no one to use it. A place made for community that has none. A space meant for warmth that now just holds air. And maybe that's the point. Because not everything in Skyrim has to be dramatic or epic or game-changing. Sometimes the emptiest places are the ones that speak the loudest. Skyrim is filled with people. Hundreds of them. Farmers, guards, innkeepers, mages, bandits, children who yell at you like you stole their lunch money. Each one of them exists for a reason. Or at least they try to. Some give you quests, some sell you potions, some dramatically die in front of you to prove that this dungeon means business. And then there's Snorid, a man so unremarkable, so untouched by questlines, so entirely devoid of purpose, that he accidentally becomes one of the most fascinating NPCs in the game. Snorid doesn't roam the roads of Skyrim. He doesn't stand out in the wilderness, waiting for players to stumble across him like some forgotten side character in a B plot that never got written. He lives in solitude. More specifically, he sleeps in the East Empire Company warehouse, a restricted access zone you're not supposed to enter unless you're on official business, which you probably aren't. And that's fitting, because Snorid doesn't want to be seen. You'll find him curled up on a bedroll, tucked away among crates and clutter. He doesn't patrol, he doesn't eat, doesn't work, he just sleeps. And sleeps, and sleeps. Like a man trying to speedrun through life with the fast travel button permanently held down. The only time he ever gets up is if he's attacked, at which point he'll fight back, briefly, then return to unconsciousness, metaphorically and probably literally. And if you do try to talk to him, he gives you the warm, friendly greeting of,
"You're not supposed to be in here."
That's it? That's the extent of Snorid's engagement with the world. Here's the thing. Almost every other NPC in Skyrim is part of a machine. A radiant system, a faction quest, a city's ecosystem. They fit in the game's design like gears in a clock. Snorid is like a marble in a blender. He doesn't move, he doesn't connect to the world in any real way. If you removed him from the game, I bet 99.9% of players would never even notice. He's not a character, he's the absence of one, which is weirdly bold when you think about it. In a game about shouting dragons out of the sky and becoming the champion of 16 different gods, Snorid is just trying to get through the day. He's like an anti-hero, but not in the edgy, morally grey way. More like an anti-entity, if that makes any sense at all. He defies narrative, and maybe, just maybe, that's the narrative Bethesda were going for. Okay, so maybe he's just a dock worker, right? He's in a warehouse, maybe he's off shift. Nope. Snorid has no job routines at all. No AI packages for hauling crates or clocking in at the East Empire Company. He's not listed in the employee registry in any meaningful way beyond existing. You don't see him hauling anything. He never interacts with anyone. There are NPCs in the warehouse who do go about their business. Snorid is not one of them. He has a job title, technically. Technically, he's a Nord employee, but that's about it. He is, in the most literal sense, an employee who has never worked a day in his life. He has no dialogue trees, no duties, no story hooks, no ambitions. Snorid is not a participant in Skyrim's economy. He is a bystander in its sleep cycle. But again, he has a name, and in Skyrim, a name actually means something. Right? Let's do a lore check. Open the wikis, comb through the UESP, look at game files, try to find a journal, a letter, a passing reference in someone else's quest. Anything to tell us about Snorid. Well, if you happen to do that, you won't find anything at all. There's no backstory, no implication of a backstory, no hints that a backstory might have once been drafted and then deleted. Snorid exists without context. He's not mentioned by any other NPC, he doesn't write, doesn't speak, doesn't appear to age, he just is. In a city filled with corruption, military tension and royal politics, Snorid is none of it. He is the most background character imaginable, which somehow makes him stand out even more. Let's give Bethesda some credit. What if Snorid is deliberate? What if he's meant to represent something? A developer joke? An artistic metaphor? A weird social experiment to see how many people would sneak into a restricted area and find a man taking a decades-long nap? There's something almost performance art about it. You have hundreds of characters fighting and yelling and dying to give the game its drama and texture, and then one guy who's just sleeping on the job. He doesn't need your help, he doesn't want your attention, he doesn't want to be awake. He is the silent witness to a world in motion. Skyrim is tearing itself apart, literally, and Snorid's just hoping it'll quiet down before his next REM cycle. Honestly, he might be the smartest one in the whole province. Here's what's wild. Despite doing nothing at all, Snorid has a small but devoted fan base. You'll find posts about him on forums. Who is this guy in the warehouse? Why is there a Nord just sleeping in solitude? What's the whole point of Snorid? Some players even roleplay explanations for him. He's a smuggler in hiding, he's cursed to sleep forever, he's the last honest worker in the East Empire Company. Snorid is a canvas, a void you can probably project meaning onto. Because that's the thing. In a game where everything is designed to pull your attention, a character who asks for none of it becomes oddly magnetic. He's not trying to impress you, he's just here, like a box or a barrel or a goat that wandered indoors and nobody wants to deal with. Snorid is part of the world, not part of your story. And that is what makes him unforgettable. Let's zoom out. Snorid is, in many ways, a weird commentary on NPCs themselves. What does it mean to be a character in a world built entirely around the player? If every other NPC exists for you, to teach you something, to fight you, to quest with you, then Snorid's refusal to participate is almost revolutionary. He's not broken, he's resistant. He's the first NPC who's looked at the player, shrugged and said, "Nah, I'm good." Maybe he knows he's in the game. Maybe he's achieved a higher level of awareness. He's the NPC who realized the futility of it all. While others chase glory, fame, dragon-slaying titles, and enchanted swords, Snorid has reached enlightenment. He is free. Or, maybe someone just forgot to delete him during development. But let me dream, I don't know. Let's be honest. Not all of us are the Dragonborn. Most of us are, Snorid. We stay in bed longer than we should. We try not to attract attention. We have no grand quest. You don't shout people off mountains or become head of the East Empire Company in a week. We just exist, watching things happen around us, occasionally wondering if you're supposed to do something else, rather than watch a video about a Skyrim NPC who does nothing at all. Snorid is the mirror we rarely want to look into. He's what happens when a game built on power fantasies leaves a crack open for ordinary silence. And somehow, The silence is louder than any dragon shout. He doesn't fight the world, he endures it, quietly and alone. Maybe that's depressing, but maybe it's really not. Maybe it's a kind of comfort. Because if Snorrid can find peace in just sleeping in a drafty warehouse, maybe we all can as well. Snorrid is an NPC who does nothing. Not metaphorically, not hyperbolically, literally nothing. No quests, no fights, no purpose, and no arc. And yet, he stays in your mind. Because in a world full of distractions, Snorrid offers stillness. In a province that demands your attention, he gives you nothing to look at. And somehow that makes you stare even harder. In a game that begs you to be the hero, Snorrid is a man who never asks you to be anything. And maybe he was a mistake, a leftover asset, an unsigned dialogue tree that wandered into the warehouse and never left. Or maybe, just maybe, he's Skyrim's quietest masterpiece. The only NPC in all of Skyrim that does nothing. And somehow that means, quite literally, everything. Skyrim is a land filled with noise. The clash of steel, the roars of dragons, and the ceaseless murmur of its people trying to survive in a frozen land. But far beyond that noise, beyond the cities and roads and reach of Jarls, there are places where silence reigns completely. One such place is Cliffside Retreat, a small cabin perched on a cliff southwest of Solitude, seemingly forgotten by both gods and men. It is one of the few locations in Skyrim that still feels alive, and yet utterly untouched. Inside lives a single woman, a nameless Nord hunter, alone but unbroken. She has no quest to offer, no dialogue of importance, no grand role in the fate of Skyrim. She simply exists, breathing quietly in the still air, tending to her craft and surviving one day at a time. Cliffside Retreat and its lone inhabitant together embody the forgotten edges of Skyrim. Not the ruins of the past or the victims of tragedy, but the living solitude of those who have chosen a quieter life, far from the chaos of the world. Cliffside Retreat is exactly what its name suggests, a retreat from everything. It stands high in the rocky wilds of Harfinger, its small chimney puffing faint smoke into the cold mountain air. To reach it, one must navigate a narrow, twisting path surrounded by wolves and bears, with no signposts or civilization to guide the way. The cabin itself is humble, a single room with a cooking pot, a bed and a few animal pelts, and the faint smell of smoke and pine. It's the kind of place easy to overlook, yet impossible to forget once found. The woman who lives here is often outside when you arrive, bow in hand, scanning the horizon for game. She greets no one, she neither attacks nor welcomes you. She simply exists, a reminder that not everyone in Skyrim seeks adventure or glory. Some seek only peace, however fragile. The Hunter of Cliffside Retreat has no name in the game's records. She is simply Hunter, a woman of few words and fewer needs. She hunts for food, crafts from the land, and lives off whatever she can gather from the wilderness. She is not aligned with any faction, not tied to any quest. She is one of Skyrim's rarest types of NPCs. A person who exists without reason in terms of the game's structure, but with great reason in the world's logic. She is the embodiment of Skyrim's quiet resilience. Many players overlook her entirely. Others find her and assume she has a quest, a story, a hidden dialogue option, but there is none. When you speak to her, she offers the same brief, functional words as any hunter in the wild. And then, when you leave, she returns to her solitude, unbothered, unchanged. That makes her presence hauntingly beautiful. In a land obsessed with prophecy, her existence is purely human. She is not meant to change the world. She's simply trying to live in it. It's easy to mistake isolation for tragedy, but in Cliffside Retreat, the silence feels intentional. Unlike other remote NPCs who have been stranded or cursed, this hunter seems at peace with her seclusion. Her cabin is neat, her tools well kept, her life orderly. The sense is not of exile, but of choice. She chose to leave behind the bustle of the cities, the danger of politics, and the noise of other people. There is dignity in that choice. While most of Skyrim's people cling to the protection of walls and guards, she stands alone in the wild, surviving without need for anyone. It's a life that is difficult, dangerous, and yet deeply authentic, the purest reflection of Skyrim's harsh beauty. In a world where dragons scorch towns and war tears apart families, perhaps solitude is the only sane response. Harfinger is one of Skyrim's most rugged regions. Its cliffs drop into misty valleys. Its forests echo with the calls of predators. The air is sharp, the light is thin, and the sound of the sea below constant. Cliffside Retreat sits right in the midst of this harsh beauty. From her porch, the hunter can see miles of wilderness, jagged peaks, rolling fog, and the faint glimmer of solitude far in the distance. But that city may as well be another world. The isolation here is physical and spiritual. It's not just that few visit, it's that few could. The path to her home is treacherous and unmarked, guarded by wolves and trolls. It's not designed for travellers, it's designed to keep them out. And so the hunter remains apart, existing in the narrow space between civilization and oblivion, where one misstep could send her tumbling into the rocks below. And yet she endures for all this time. In most of Skyrim, every NPC exists for a reason, a quest, a piece of lore, a task. But the Hunter of Cliffside Retreat has no such function. You can sell items to her or give information, but that's about it. She's not part of any questline or hidden narrative. And that is precisely what makes her remarkable. She represents the parts of the world that don't revolve around the player. The places and people that exist simply because the world would feel emptier without them. Her life, in a sense, gives Skyrim its soul. Without characters like her, nameless, quiet, and living entirely apart from the drama of dragons and politics, the world would feel staged. But because she exists, the illusion of a breathing world becomes real. She hunts, eats, sleeps, and survives. Not for you, not for a quest, but because that's what she does. That is her purpose, even if the game doesn't call it one. Despite her apparent contentment, there's an undeniable melancholy in her life. Skyrim's wilderness is not a kind place. The nights are long, the predators relentless, and the winters cruel. When you stand inside her cabin and hear the wind battering against the walls, it's hard not to imagine what those nights must be like. The loneliness, the fear, the unending silence. A single sound outside could mean a deer or a saber cat. Every decision becomes a matter of survival. And yet she stays. That resilience, quiet, uncelebrated, and entirely human, is what makes her one of Skyrim's most powerful characters. She doesn't slay dragons, but she defeats the cold every morning. She doesn't shout through them, but she endures storms. Her story isn't told through quests, but through a continued existence in a world designed to crush the weak. There is, however, a strange peace in her isolation. In a land constantly torn apart by war and prophecy, she has escaped it all. She owes allegiance to no Jarl. She pays no taxes. No soldiers march past her door. The troubles of the world end at her cliff's edge. In that sense, she is freer than any other person in Skyrim. Her solitude is not punishment, it is liberation. She lives in balance with the land, untouched by the greed and violence that define so much of the province. Perhaps she knows something the rest of Skyrim does not. That to live quietly is sometimes the greatest rebellion of all. It's easy to imagine a future where the Dragonborn turns Cliffside Retreat into something more. Not a fort or a settlement, but a home. The cabin's location makes it perfect for peace, overlooking breathtaking vistas, shielded from roads and politics alike. With little work, it could become a sanctuary, a hunting lodge or a refuge for those wary to Skyrim's endless conflict. Perhaps even the hunter herself could become a companion or a teacher, passing on her quiet wisdom about the land, the animals, and the survival herself. Her story doesn't need tragedy, it deserves continuation. But for now, she remains what she has always been, a ghost of the living world, content to be forgotten. In a land obsessed with glory, she embodies the rarest kind of power, the strength to live unseen, the courage to be alone, and the grace to endure without recognition. Despite her strength, it's impossible not to feel that the world has forgotten her. No one comes to visit, no one mentions her in passing. She will never be remembered in songs or books. When the dragon passes by, she might exchange a few brief words, but then the player moves on, and she remains, her life unchanging. And perhaps that is her tragedy. She lives in one of the most beautiful and secluded spots in Skyrim, but beauty without companionship becomes a kind of curse. The cliffs, the trees, and the sky are her only witnesses. If she ever once lived in a city or had a family, that part of her life has been buried beneath years of solitude. Now there is only the hunt, only the silence, only the wind through the pines. Cliffside Retreat stands unchanged, its lone chimney still smoking against the cold. The hunter moves through her days like a shadow, each one blending into the next. She will never be written into the history books, nor sung of by bards. Yet in her quiet endurance, she represents something far greater than any legend. The soul of Skyrim itself, harsh, silent, beautiful, and unyielding. The most deserted NPC and place in all of Skyrim are not tragic because they are forgotten. They are powerful because they continue, even when no one is watching. To understand Septimus, one must first grasp the symbolism of his location. His ice cave is perched far north of Winterhold, closer to the endless sea of ghosts than to any human settlement. There are no roads, no signs of trade, not even an abandoned village nearby. He exists literally outside the map of civilization. Other reclusive NPCs at least linger near society. Nafi the beggar in Iverstead is shunned yet surrounded by villagers. Miko's deceased master in his shack in the woods died alone, but his home sits within walking distance of towns and hunters. Even Anise, the witch in her riverside cabin, still lives near roads where travellers may stumble upon her. Septimus is unique. He has placed himself on a patch of ice so far north that the world forgets him. This physical exile is not accidental. It represents how thoroughly he has been abandoned. While most NPCs remind the player of Skyrim's network of relationships, Septimus's location makes it clear he has no ties, no allies, no family, and no future. When the Dragonborn finally meets him, his state of mind leaves no doubt that his abandonment is not only social, but psychological as well. His dialogue is fractured, full of contradictions, as if he speaks to himself more than to others. He references thoughts and concepts half-formed, as though the burden of forbidden knowledge has broken his ability to communicate. This mental collapse is what separates him from other figures. The Greybeards live in chosen silence, but remain sane and deliberate. Hermits across Skyrim often speak with clarity, grounded in either religious devotion or survivalist logic. Septimus, by contrast, is neither. His words reveal a man fractured by obsession, enslaved to knowledge he cannot control. Scholars thrive on discourse, on debate, on teaching. But Septimus has none of this. No one listens, no one even comes to see him. No one answers, and eventually his thoughts consume themselves. The result is a man abandoned not only by his peers, but by his own capacity to function in the world. As though mortal abandonment was not enough, Septimus's greatest tragedy is his manipulation by Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of forbidden knowledge. Septimus believes himself chosen. He imagines that his discoveries are his own, that he has been singled out for a destiny greater than any mortal could achieve. In reality, Mora is merely stringing him along, using him as a temporary vessel for collecting information. His obsession with the Dwemer lockbox is not his triumph, but his trap. When the Dragonborn steps into the role of Mora's new agent, Septimus's fate is sealed. Mora abandons him in an instant, no longer needing his service. For a man who believed knowledge was his divine calling, the realization, or perhaps lack of realization, that he was merely a pawn is devastating. He dies not with glory, but with indifference, disintegrating into dust in the cave that has already become his tomb. This abandonment is cosmic. It is not simply that his colleagues left him, or his mind betrayed him. Even the god he worshipped cast him aside. And few characters in Skyrim face betrayal on this scale. Septimus's link to the college is never explicitly detailed, but his knowledge of the Elder Scrolls and Dwemer studies make it almost certain he once belonged there. His skills would have been invaluable in a place dedicated to magical learning, and yet the college never mentions him. No student remembers his teachings. No master acknowledges his disappearance. His name is absent from all conversation within Winterhold's ruined halls. This silence is telling that Septimus is not remembered as a tragic figure, not even whispered as a cautionary tale. He has been erased by omission. For a scholar whose greatest ambition would have been recognition of his work, this neglect is the cruelest form of abandonment. He was not cast out in scandal or remembered as a warning. He was simply just forgotten, as though he never existed at all. The ice cave itself mirrors his existence. It is crude, battered, and devoid of comfort. A single fire burns, books and scrolls lie scattered, and the great Dwemer lockbox looms in the corner like a coffin waiting to be opened. Unlike inns or farmhouses, it is not a place of life. Unlike hunter cabins or mage retreats, it is not a place of work or survival. It is a prison, both literal and symbolic. Septimus cannot leave because his obsession binds him to the lockbox. He is its caretaker, its watchman, and its victim. When he finally dies, the cave does not change. It remains frozen on the ice, an abandoned place reflecting its abandoned master. To stumble upon it after his death is unsettling. The fire still burns, but the man is gone, erased as thoroughly as if he had never lived there at all. And the cave becomes a ghostly reminder of the most abandoned man in Skyrim. The Dragonborn's interaction with Septimus is brief compared to the scale of Skyrim's adventures. They arrive, they listen, they aid him in his tasks, yet their presence only highlights his loneliness. For a short time, Septimus has contact with another person, perhaps the first in years, but even this is hollow. The Dragonborn is not his friend, nor his saviour. They are his tool, just as he is Hermaeus Mora's tool. When his usefulness ends, the Dragonborn cannot save him. They can only watch as he disintegrates, leaving nothing behind. The player's role as witness underscores the tragedy. Septimus's abandonment is so complete that even the protagonist of Skyrim, the most powerful figure in Tamriel, cannot alter his fate. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of Septimus's loneliness lies in what it could have been. His knowledge of the Elder Scrolls and Dwemer technology places him in the most brilliant minds of his age. He could have been a leading figure at the college, guiding generations of students. He could have contributed to Skyrim's understanding of magic and history. He could have written books, shaped debates, or even served rulers with his insight. Instead, his genius curled into obsession. His isolation prevented collaboration. His fixation closed him off from dialogue. And his devotion to a Daedric prince consumed his sanity. All his potential ended in ashes on the floor of his cave. Abandoned by others, abandoned by himself, and abandoned by the god he trusted, Septimus is the embodiment of wasted brilliance. In the end, Septimus Signus is the most abandoned NPC in Skyrim, because he is abandoned in every possible sense. His cave is abandoned on the ice, his mind abandoned by reason, his body abandoned by the Daedra, his memory abandoned by the college. He leaves no descendants, no allies, no students, and no legacy. He leaves only a cave that few will ever find and fewer will ever care about. His tragedy is not one of violent death or battlefield glory. It is the slow suffocation of neglect, obsession, and cosmic indifference. And that is why Septimus Signus, mad scholar of the Elder Scrolls, deserves the title as the most abandoned NPC in all of Skyrim. Skyrim is a world built on movement. People travel, stories unfold, and almost everywhere you go, there's a sense that something is happening, something continuing, even when you're not there. But these places and these characters, they don't move, they don't change, they don't connect. They just exist quietly, almost unnoticed, tucked away from everything else the world has to offer. And that's what makes them stand out. Because in a game filled with noise, conflict, and constant activity, loneliness isn't something you expect to feel. But when you find it in an empty camp, a forgotten ruin, or a single NPC with no one around them, it lingers far longer than anything else. Not because of what's there, but because of what isn't. Skyrim is full of places you're expected to find. Cities, ruins, caves, locations marked on the map, built to pull your attention toward them. But some places feel different. They feel hidden on purpose. The kind of locations you only discover by accident, through a strange detail, a hidden path, or by simply looking somewhere most players never think to check. And when you find them, it almost feels like you weren't supposed to. That's what makes these places so memorable, not because they're the biggest or most important, but because Skyrim does such a good job of concealing them, tucking them away behind mountains, beneath buildings, inside forgotten caves, or hidden passages that most people walk right past without ever noticing. And once you find one, you start wondering how many more you've already missed. Elder Sanctuary feels less like a location in Skyrim and more like something you accidentally uncover while looking for something else. It doesn't announce itself in the way most important places do. There's no towering structure visible from a distance, no major city built around it, no obvious sign that one of the oldest and most sacred locations in Skyrim is hidden deep. In fact, if not for the quest tied to it, many players would likely never find it at all. And that's what makes it such an effective concealed location, not because it's impossible to reach, but because it feels deliberately tucked away from the rest of the world, protected both by geography and atmosphere. The journey there immediately sets it apart. You travel through narrow mountain paths and isolated terrain that already feels removed from normal exploration routes. Unlike major landmarks that naturally draw your attention across the map, Elder Sanctuary exists off to the side, hidden behind layers of rock and wilderness that make it feel disconnected from everything around it. The cave entrance itself is easy to miss if you aren't specifically looking for it. There's nothing grand or dramatic about it from the outside, just another opening in the mountains, another cave among countless others scattered across Skyrim. But the moment you step inside, the tone changes completely. The sanctuary doesn't feel like a normal cave. It feels alive. That shift is immediate. The lighting softens, the soundscape changes, and the environment opens into something far more organic and untouched than almost anywhere else in the game. Roots stretch through the walls, water flows gently through the cavern, and light filters in from above in a way that makes the entire place feel isolated from time itself. It's not just hidden geographically, it feels hidden spiritually, like a place that exists outside the normal structure of Skyrim. And that atmosphere is what defines the sanctuary more than anything else. Unlike ruins or dungeons that conceal themselves through danger or mystery, Elder Sanctuary conceals itself through preservation. It feels protected not by guards or traps, but by the fact that it simply doesn't belong to the outside world. The deeper you move through the cave, the more that feeling intensifies. The environment becomes denser with plant life, more vibrant, more unnatural in the context of Skyrim's otherwise harsh landscape. Because this place shouldn't exist the way it does. Not in a province defined by snow, war, and decay. The contrast between Elder Sanctuary and the rest of Skyrim is part of what makes it feel so off the map. Most of the game's environments are cold, damaged, or shaped by conflict in some way. Even beautiful places usually carry signs of danger or instability, but the sanctuary feels untouched, pure in a way that almost seems impossible with the outside world. And that purity creates a distance. It separates the sanctuary from normal exploration, because it doesn't feel like it's connected to the same reality as everything else. You don't walk through it like you would a cave. You move carefully, almost instinctively quieter, as the game itself is encouraging you not to disturb the peace. That feeling becomes even stronger when you finally reach the Elder Gleam tree itself. The tree doesn't just dominate the sanctuary physically, it defines the entire atmosphere around it. Massive roots twist through the cavern, glowing with a sense of age and significance that immediately makes the location feel sacred. It's one of the few places in Skyrim where the environment alone communicates importance without needing enemies, dialogue, or exposition to reinforce it. And yet, despite how visually striking it is, the tree also feels deeply concealed. Not hidden from sight once you arrive, but hidden from the world. The sanctuary is isolated so completely that it almost feels forgotten. Known only to a handful of pilgrims and worshippers who intentionally seek it out. There are no settlements nearby, no roads leading directly to it, no signs that this place has become part of normal Skyrim life, despite its immense spiritual significance. That isolation is important because it gives the sanctuary a sense of fragility. It feels like a place that could be lost. Like if people stopped searching for it, the world would simply close around it and leave it behind. The NPCs connected to the sanctuary reinforce this feeling as well. Morris, for example, treats the location with reverence that borders on obsession. To him, Elder Gleam Sanctuary isn't just important, it's sacred beyond question. And while his admiration helps communicate the significance of the place, it also highlights how separated the sanctuary is from ordinary understanding. Most people in Skyrim don't talk about the Elder Gleam. They don't visit it, they barely seem aware it exists. That lack of awareness adds to the feeling that the sanctuary belongs to a different layer of the world entirely, and the quest itself deepens that idea, because reaching the tree isn't enough. You're forced to decide how you interact with it, whether you violently cut into its bark to retrieve sap, or seek a more powerful alternative through Morris's guidance. That choice changes the tone of the sanctuary dramatically, because it reframes the location from simply being hidden to being vulnerable. The moment you strike the tree violently, the sanctuary reacts. Spriggans emerge, the environment turns hostile, and suddenly the peaceful isolation of the cave shifts into something defensive. That reaction is one of the most important details in the entire location, because it confirms something the atmosphere already implied. This place is alive in more ways than one. It isn't just a hidden location, sitting passively in the mountains. It actively resists disruption. The sanctuary protects itself, not through architecture or traps, but through nature itself responding to intrusion. And that makes the concealment feel intentional on a deeper level, as though the world itself wants this place hidden. Compared to other concealed locations in Skyrim, which often rely on physical secrecy or hidden entrances, Elder Gleam Sanctuary feels hidden emotionally and spiritually. It's not difficult to access once you know where it is, but understanding the place is another matter entirely. Because the sanctuary doesn't function like the rest of Skyrim. It doesn't reward aggression. It doesn't revolve around conquest. It asks for restraint, respect, and silence. Those qualities are so rare within the structure of Skyrim that the sanctuary immediately feels separate from everything else. Even visually, the location seems disconnected from the rest of the world. The glowing light, the dense greenery, the water, the roots, it all creates an atmosphere closer to myth than reality. Walking through the sanctuary feels dreamlike, almost unreal compared to the harsher environments outside. And that reality is what makes it memorable. Not because it's dangerous, not because it's difficult, but because it feels like something hidden so deeply within Skyrim that the world itself almost forgot what was there. When you compare Elder Gleam's sanctuary to High Hrothgar, the similarities become immediately clear, but so do the differences in how each place conceals itself. Both locations are hidden through isolation rather than secrecy. They sit high within Skyrim's mountains, separated from the rest of the world by distance, harsh terrain, and the effort required to reach them. And both creates a feeling that you're leaving ordinary Skyrim behind as you approach them. The climb to High Hrothgar strips away noise and conflict until all that's left is silence and snow. Elder Sanctuary does something similar, but through nature instead of elevation. The deeper you move into the sanctuary, the more disconnected you feel from the outside world. But where High Hrothgar feels restrained and disciplined, Elder Sanctuary feels alive and untouched. High Hrothgar is built on control, quiet halls, measured speech, isolation, maintained through intention. Elder Sanctuary feels more organic, as though it concealed itself naturally over time rather than through philosophy or choice. That difference changes how each place feels emotionally. High Hrothgar isolates you through silence and distance. Elder Sanctuary isolates you through atmosphere, making the outside world feel impossibly far away, even when it isn't. That's what makes Elder Sanctuary one of the most concealed and hidden places in the game. Not just its location, not just its isolation, but the feeling that it exists quietly beneath everything else, untouched by war, untouched by politics, untouched by time in a way very few places ever are. A place that doesn't hide through secrecy alone, but through stillness, through reverence, through the sense that some things in Skyrim were never meant to be part of ordinary life at all. And when you finally leave the sanctuary behind, stepping back into the cold and conflict of the outside world, the contrast hits immediately, because it feels less like you explored a hidden cave, and more like you briefly stepped into somewhere the rest of Skyrim was never supposed to reach. Helgen is one of the strangest hidden places in all of Skyrim, because technically everyone knows where it is. It's the very first location most players ever see, the place where the entire game begins. You ride into it as a prisoner, watch the executions prepare to unfold, and witness the exact moment Skyrim changes forever with Alduin's attack. For a brief period, Helgen feels incredibly important, like the center of the world itself. But after that opening sequence, something unusual happens. The game almost completely abandons it, and that abandonment is what transforms Helgen into one of the most concealed places in Skyrim. Not physically concealed at a glance, but emotionally and structurally hidden away from the rest of the world. Once the attack ends and the player escapes, Helgen basically becomes frozen in time. While the rest of Skyrim continues moving, cities rebuilding after dragon attacks, factions evolving, quests progressing, Helgen stays exactly as it was left. Destroyed, burned, empty. And because the main story rarely sends you back there, the town slowly begins to feel forgotten, despite being one of the most significant locations in the entire game. That feeling starts the moment you eventually return. Most players don't revisit Helgen immediately after escaping. The world opens up, quests begin stacking, and the game constantly pushes your attention elsewhere. By the time you finally wander back to Helgen, hours later, maybe even dozens of hours later, the place feels different. Not because it changed, but because it didn't. The destruction remains untouched. Burned buildings still collapse inward. Bodies and debris are left scattered through the streets. The atmosphere feels unnaturally still, like the town exists outside of the normal flow of time. And that stillness is what makes Helgen so unsettling after Alduin's attack. It's not just ruined, it's preserved in its ruin itself. Most destroyed locations in the game eventually recover, repopulate, or evolve in some way. Helgen doesn't. It remains trapped in the exact moment of catastrophe, abandoned by nearly everyone except bandits and scavengers who slowly move into the wreckage. That transition from functioning town to empty shell happens so completely that it almost feels unreal. Because Helgen wasn't a forgotten ruin originally, it became one, and you witnessed it the exact moment it happened. That's what separates it from every other hidden location in Skyrim. Places like Elder Sanctuary or High Hrothgar feel concealed because they were always isolated, always removed from normal life. Helgen is different because its concealment happens after you already know it. The game takes a place that should remain important and quietly pushes it into obscurity. And over time, that obscurity becomes part of its identity. The physical layout of Helgen reinforces this feeling constantly. The town sits tucked away in the mountains near the border of Cyrodiil, already somewhat isolated geographically. Before the attack, that isolation likely made it feel secure, a small fortified settlement removed from the larger political conflicts of Skyrim. After the attack, though, the same geography turns it into something else entirely. A dead end. A place people avoid rather than pass through. The mountain walls around the town make the destruction feel enclosed, trapped within its own boundaries. When you walk through Helgen after the attack, there's no sense of movement or recovery. The ruined towers loom over empty streets, creating the impression that the town was simply cut out of Skyrim and left behind. Even the sound design contributes to this. Helgen lacks the ambient life present in every functional settlement. No merchants calling out, no guards patrolling normally, no routine conversations filling the streets. Instead, you hear wind, distant creaking, and the occasional movement of enemies occupying the remains. It feels hollow, and that hollowness becomes more noticeable because you remember what it looked like before. That contrast is what gives Helgen its hidden quality. It's not concealed because players can't find it. It's concealed because the world itself seems to stop acknowledging it after the opening. NPCs rarely discuss it in meaningful detail. The war continues, cities continue functioning, life moves on. But Helgen doesn't. It stays broken. That creates a strange emotional disconnect around the location. This was the site of Alduin's return, the event that signals the beginning of the dragon crisis across Skyrim. Logically, it should remain one of the most important places in the province, but instead it becomes almost invisible once the opening sequence ends. And that invisibility feels intentional, as though the game wants Helgen to fade into the background while still existing physically within the world. That fading is what makes revisiting it so impactful. You return expecting some trace of the significance it once held, but instead you just find emptiness. The town has become a ruin so quickly that it almost feels erased from history before history even had a time to react to it. And the enemies occupying Helgen only deepen that feeling. Bandits eventually move into the ruins, treating the town not as a site of catastrophe, but as an opportunity. That shift is deeply unsettling because it shows how quickly tragedy becomes normalized in Skyrim. A place destroyed by a dragon attack, filled with death and devastation, becomes just another hideout to exploit. That transition happens quietly, without ceremony, without acknowledgement. And because of that, Helgen starts to feel less like a former town and more like a ghost one. The ruined keep beneath the town amplifies this even further. During the opening sequence, it functions as a desperate escape point, chaotic and dangerous as Alduin tears Helgen apart above you. Returning later changes the tone completely. The same corridors that once felt urgent now feel abandoned, stripped of movement and purpose. You're no longer escaping, you're retracing. And retracing your steps through a place tied so heavily to the beginning of a game creates a strange emotional effect. It feels smaller than you remember, quieter than you remember, but also heavier somehow. Every destroyed wall and collapsed structure carries the memory of what happened here, because unlike most locations in Skyrim, Helgen isn't just tied to the lore, it's tied directly to the player's experience. You didn't hear about Helgen's destruction, you literally lived through it. That personal connection makes the concealment hit harder. The game doesn't just hide a location, it hides a memory. Over time, Helgen drifts further and further away from the player's attention as Skyrim expands outward with endless quests and exploration, until eventually it becomes easy to forget. And when you finally return, the realization that nothing changed becomes almost unsettling on its own. Compared to other concealed places in Skyrim, Helgen works differently, because it's hidden through neglect rather than distance or mystery. It's sitting there openly on the map, accessible at almost any point in the game, but the narrative itself moves away from it so completely that the location starts to feel buried beneath everything else. And that buried feeling is what makes Helgen one of the most hidden places in Skyrim after its destruction. Not because it's hard to reach, not because players don't know it exists, but because the world leaves it behind so completely that it begins to feel disconnected from everything around it. A ruined beginning, frozen in place while the rest of Skyrim moves forward. That's what makes Helgen so memorable after Alduin's attack. It becomes a place trapped between importance and abandonment, a location every player sees, but very few truly return to. And when you finally do return, walking through those burned streets in silence, it doesn't feel like you're revisiting a town. It feels like uncovering something the game itself quietly tried to bury beneath the rest of the world. Skyrim is a land that constantly puts itself on display. Cities rise out of the landscape, ruins tower over the horizon. Even its secrets often feel like they want to be found. But not every place is like this. Some locations don't just hide from the player, they feel hidden from the world itself. Tucked away in mountain ridges no one climbs, buried beneath ruins that no one visits, or quietly existing in places where realistically no one should even know they're there. These aren't just hard to find locations, they're places that feel forgotten, cut off from trade, from travel, from history itself. Places that don't show up in conversation, don't appear in quests, and don't seem to belong to anyone at all. And that's what makes them so interesting. Because when a place is hidden from the world, not just the player, it stops feeling like part of Skyrim's story and starts feeling like something that was never meant to be found at all. Reachwind Eyrie is one of the few places in Skyrim that feels truly hidden, not just because of where it is, but because of how completely disconnected it is from everything around it. As if it exists outside the awareness of the world itself. Located high in the mountains southeast of Markarth, reaching it is less about following a path and more about deliberately going out of your way to find something that the game never really asks you to look for. The Reach is already a region defined by harsh terrain and vertical design, with cliffs and winding paths that make exploration feel uneven and often incomplete. But Reachwind sits above even that, tucked away in a position that feels intentionally removed. There are no nearby settlements guiding you toward it, no meaningful foot traffic, and no sense that anyone in Skyrim even acknowledges its existence. And when you finally arrive, what you're met with isn't exactly activity or danger, but stillness. A quiet, elevated Dwemer structure standing alone against the sky, with no inhabitants, no defences, and no clear purpose remaining. That absence is what defines it, because unlike most Dwemer locations in Skyrim, which are dense, mechanical, and filled with automatons or Falmer, Reachwind feels stripped down to almost nothing. It lacks the usual complexity associated with these ruins. There are no sprawling underground corridors, no functioning systems, no sense that it's still operated in any capacity. It's just the structure itself, a platform, a tower, a fragment of something that once had meaning, now left behind with no context to support it. And that creates a very different kind of presence. Most Dwemer ruins feel like remnants of a lost civilization that you can still interact with. Places where the past is still active in some form. Reachwind doesn't have that quality. It feels inert, complete in its stillness, as if whatever role it once played has been entirely erased, leaving behind only the physical shape of its existence. The fact that it's positioned so high above the surrounding landscape only reinforces that feeling. From the top, you can see across the Reach, the jagged terrain stretching out in every direction, distant landmarks barely visible through the haze. It gives the impression that this place was meant to observe rather than participate, to exist above the world rather than within it. And yet there's no indication of what it was observing, or why it needed to be here at all. That lack of explanation is what makes it feel truly hidden and isolated. Not in the sense that it's difficult to find, but in the sense that it's been removed from the narrative entirely. The game doesn't reference it, no quests lead you there, no characters mention it to my knowledge. It doesn't tie into the broader story of the Dwemer in any meaningful way. It's just there. And because of that, it starts to feel less like a designed location and more like a leftover piece of the world. Something that exists without needing to justify itself. That kind of design is rare in Skyrim, where most locations serve a clear purpose, whether it's for gameplay, storytelling, or exploration. Reachwind resists that structure. It doesn't reward you in any significant way for finding it. It doesn't challenge you. It doesn't even try to hold your attention for very long. You arrive, you take in the view, you recognize the isolation of the space, and then there's nothing else to do. And that nothing is exactly what makes it memorable, because it creates a moment where the player is forced to confront the idea that not every place in Skyrim exists for them. Some places exist independently, without quests, without rewards, without any acknowledgement at all. And that independence makes Reachwind feel like it's hidden in a deeper sense. Not just physically, but conceptually. It's hidden from the systems that define the rest of the game. Hidden from the flow of progression, from the structure of quests, from the idea that everything should lead somewhere or mean something. It simply exists high above the world, untouched and unbothered. There's also something distinctly Dwemer about that kind of detachment. The Dwemer are known for their mystery, for their sudden disappearance, and their advanced, often incomprehensible technology. But most of their ruins still feel grounded in function. You can see what they built, how it might have worked, what purpose it might have served. Reachwind doesn't offer that clarity. It feels more abstract, more like a fragment of an idea than a fully realized structure. And because of that, it leans into the more unknowable aspects of Dwemer design. It becomes less about understanding and more about presence. Deepwood Redoubt is one of those locations in Skyrim that doesn't immediately present itself as hidden. But the deeper you go, the more it becomes clear that what you've found isn't just a location off the beaten path. It's something deliberately tucked away from the rest of the world. On the surface, it appears to be just another Forsworn-controlled ruin in the Reach, positioned west of Solitude, surrounded by the region's familiar cliffs and winding paths. You can see parts of it from a distance, stone structures rising out of the landscape in a way that feels consistent with other locations in the area. But that initial visibility is misleading, because Deepwood Redoubt isn't defined by what you can see. It's defined by what it leads to. Once you push past the outer layers, past the expected resistance and into the interior spaces, the location begins to shift. It stops feeling like a simple camp or ruin and starts to feel like a passage, something guiding you further away from Skyrim's surface and into a space that feels almost completely removed from it. This transition is what makes it so effective. Many locations in Skyrim are self-contained. You enter, you clear them, and you leave. Deepwood Redoubt doesn't work like that. It pulls you inward, gradually separating you from the open world until you emerge somewhere entirely different, Deepwood Vale. And that's where the real sense of hiddenness begins. Deepwood Vale doesn't feel like it belongs to the same world you were just in. It's enclosed, quiet, and strangely untouched, surrounded by towering cliffs that cut it off from the rest of the map. There are no roads leading to it, no natural paths that would suggest easy access. The only real way in is through Deepwood Redoubt itself, which immediately reframes the entire experience. What seemed like a standard location becomes a kind of gate, a controlled entry point into something far more isolated. And because of that, the Vale feels less like a place you discovered and more like a place you weren't meant to reach at all. The Forsworn presence here adds another layer to that feeling. Unlike more scattered camps, this space feels intentional, almost curated. It's not just a group of outcasts surviving in the wilderness. It feels like a chosen location, somewhere specifically selected because of how hidden and defensible it is. The surrounding cliffs act as natural walls. Their limited access points make it easy to control, and the overall layout gives the impression of a place that exists outside the influence of Skyrim's border conflicts. While the Forsworn are typically portrayed as aggressive and chaotic, here they feel more settled, more rooted. Like they've found a space where they can exist without interference. And that changes how the location is perceived. It's not just hidden geographically, it's hidden socially and politically as well. It's a place where a group has effectively removed itself from the rest of the province, carving out a pocket of isolation that operates on its own terms. The environment itself reinforces this separation. Deepwood Vale is visually distinct, with a calmer, almost serene atmosphere that contrasts with the harshness of the surrounding reach. There's water, greenery, and a sense of stillness that feels out of place, given how close it is to the more active regions. It doesn't feel abandoned, but it doesn't feel connected either. It exists in kind of an in-between state, where life is present but contained, cut off from the outside world by both geography and design. And that containment is what makes it feel truly hidden, not because it's invisible, but because it's inaccessible in any natural sense. You don't just wander into Deepwood Vale, you have to be led there, intentionally or not, through a structure that acts as both barrier and a gateway. This layered design is what sets Deepwood Redoubt apart from other hidden locations. It's not just a place you find, it's a place you pass through, and in doing so, it changes your relationship with the space around you. By the time you reach the Vale, Skyrim feels distant, almost irrelevant. The usual markers of the world, roads, cities, quests, fade away, replaced by something quieter, more self-contained. And that shift creates a kind of disorientation, a sense that you've stepped outside the normal boundaries of the game. It's subtle but effective, because it doesn't rely on spectacle or scale. It relies on contrast, on the idea that a place can feel hidden not because it's small or hard to see, but because it's separated in a way that most locations aren't. Deepwood Redoubt and the Vale it conceals represents a different kind of secrecy, one built on layers, on progression, on the gradual realization that what you've found isn't just another point on the map, but a space that exists parallel to it. Crag's Lane Cavern is a location that, on the surface, feels almost impossible to classify as hidden. And yet, the more time you spend thinking about it, the more it starts to feel like one of the most deliberate concealed places in Skyrim. Not because of where it is, but because of what it's trying to be. Located just a short distance from Shore's Stone, a settlement that itself feels overlooked and peripheral, this cavern sits in a region that players can pass through multiple times without ever feeling compelled to stop. There are no dramatic landmarks that pull your attention toward it, no major quest lines that push you in its direction early on, and nothing about its exterior that suggests it holds anything particularly unusual. It looks like another cave, another minor point on the map, the kind of place Skyrim is filled with. And that's exactly what makes it so effective, because what's hidden here isn't the location itself, it's the nature of what's inside. When you enter Crag's Lane Cavern, the expectation is familiar: bandits, animals, and maybe a small dungeon to clear, but that expectation is immediately disrupted. Instead of chaos or decay, you find structure, organisation, a space that feels lived in, not just occupied. The cavern is being used as an underground fighting pit, a place where gamblers and spectators gather to watch organised brawls, where money changes hands and violence is turned into entertainment. And that shift in tone is what reframes the entire location. This isn't a hideout in the traditional sense. It's a hidden operation, a self-contained system that exists just outside of the sight of Skyrim's surface. functioning in a way that feels almost civilized despite its brutality. The people here aren't just surviving, they're participating in something. There's a sense of routine, of purpose, of roles being filled. Fighters, organisers, onlookers. It's a small ecosystem, quietly operating beneath the world above. And that's what makes it feel hidden in a deeper sense. Because the cavern isn't isolated due to geography alone. It's isolated by design. It's meant to be unseen. The fact it's so close to Shore's stone only reinforces that idea. This isn't a remote mountain peak or a distant ruin. It's right there, near a functioning settlement and yet completely still disconnected from it. The people in Shore's stone don't reference it. There's no indication that this kind of activity is happening just beyond their reach. It exists in parallel, close enough to be convenient, but far enough to remain unnoticed. And that proximity creates an interesting tension, because it suggests that Skyrim isn't just hiding ancient ruins or forgotten structures. It's hiding active, ongoing systems that the player can easily miss. That kind of hiddenness feels more intentional, more human. It's not the result of time or decay, it's the result of choice. Someone built this, someone maintains it, someone benefits from it continuing to exist without interference. The cavern itself supports this idea through its layout. It's not sprawling or complex, but it's purposeful. The central fighting area is clearly defined, with space for spectators and movement that feels controlled, rather than chaotic. There's a sense that this place has been shaped to serve a specific function, even if that function is never fully explained. You're not given a deep backstory or a larger narrative context. Instead, you're left to piece together what's happening based on what you see. And what you see is enough to understand that this isn't a random occurrence. It's something established, something ongoing. But because it's self-contained, it never expands beyond the cavern itself. It doesn't connect to larger factions or major storylines. It doesn't influence the world outside. It remains small, quiet, and contained. And that containment is what keeps it hidden. Not just from the player, but from the world. Craig's Lane Cavern also highlights a different kind of hidden space compared to the places like Blackreach or Deepwood Vale. Those locations feel removed because of their scale or geography. Craig Lane feels hidden because of its subtlety. It doesn't overwhelm you with size or spectacle. It blends in, disguising itself as something ordinary until you look closer. And even then, it doesn't fully reveal itself. There's no grand explanation, no deeper layer waiting to be uncovered. It simply exists as it is. A quiet pocket of activity that operates independently of everything else. Blackreach might be one of the most paradoxical locations in all of Skyrim, because despite being one of the largest and most visually striking areas in the entire game, it still manages to feel deeply hidden, not just in terms of access, but in how completely it is removed from the surface world. Unlike most locations that are tucked behind mountains or concealed by geography, Blackreach is hidden vertically, buried far beneath Skyrim itself, existing as a vast subterranean expanse that most players will never fully explore unless they are deliberately pushed towards it. And even then, the game never presents it as something you can simply stumble upon. You don't just find Blackreach by wandering. You have to descend into it, piece by piece, through Dwemer ruins that act less like entrances and more like barriers, each one reinforcing the idea that what lies below is not meant to be easily reached. By the time you arrive after navigating mechanical corridors, Falmer-infested tunnels, and the remnants of a long-dead civilization, the transition feels complete. You're no longer in Skyrim, at least not in any recognisable sense. What makes Blackreach so effective as an isolated place isn't just its scale, but its disconnection. It doesn't feel like an extension of the world above. It feels like a separate layer entirely, operating under its own rules, its own atmosphere, and its own sense of time. The glowing mushrooms, the artificial lighting, the massive caverns stretching endlessly in every direction. It all creates the impression of a world that has existed in isolation for so long that it no longer relates to the surface at all. And that separation is what defines its hidden nature. Because Blackreach isn't hidden in a way that invites discovery. It's hidden in a way that suggests it was never meant to be a part of the player's journey in the first place. It exists beneath everything, unseen, and largely unaffected by the events unfolding above. The Civil War doesn't reach here. The holds don't govern it. Even the sky, one of Skyrim's most defining features, is replaced by an artificial ceiling that mimics something distant and unreachable. And yet, despite that isolation, Blackreach is not empty. It's filled with life, but a kind of life that feels alien compared to the rest of the game. Falmer move through the ruins, blind and adapted to the darkness, while Dwemer automatons continue their silent routines, remnant of a system that no longer has purpose. Giant glowing flora replaces forests, and the ambient sound design creates a constant sense of unease, as if the entire space is alive in a way that doesn't fully reveal itself. This combination of activity and isolation creates a unique tension. Blackreach feels inhabited, but not in a way that welcomes you. It feels like you've entered something self-sustaining, something that doesn't need the surface world and doesn't acknowledge it. And that's what makes it feel so deeply tucked away, not just physically, but conceptually as well. It's a place that exists outside of Skyrim's awareness, even though it lies directly beneath it. The Dwemer architecture scattered throughout only deepens that feeling. Massive structures, elevators, and ruins stretch across the cavern, hinting at a time where this place was not just inhabited, but thriving. But unlike the ruins on the surface, which are often fragmented and partially reclaimed by nature, Blackreach's structures feel more intact, more preserved, as if time has moved differently here. And yet there's still no clear understanding of what it all was. The purpose of Blackreach remains vague, its full scale and function never fully explained. It's a reminder that the Dwemer, one of Skyrim's most mysterious civilizations, built things that even the game itself doesn't fully contextualize. And that lack of explanation reinforces that idea that Blackreach isn't just hidden from the player, it's hidden from understanding. Even when you're standing in it exploring its depths, you never feel like you fully grasp what it is or why it exists. And that uncertainty becomes part of its identity. The way you access Blackreach also plays a significant role in how it's perceived. There's no single obvious entrance. Instead, it's connected to multiple Dwemer ruins across Skyrim, each one offering a different path downward. This fragmented access makes it feel less like a destination and more like a network, something spread beneath the world rather than confined to a single point. It's not just hidden in one place, it's hidden everywhere, just out of reach, waiting beneath locations you might have already explored without realizing what lies below. And that idea transforms the way you think about Skyrim's geography. Skyrim is a world that constantly invites exploration. But what these places reveal is that not everything is meant to be seen. Some locations hide behind mountains, others lie buried beneath cities, and some exist so far outside the natural flow of the world that they might as well not exist at all. From the depths of Blackreach to the quiet isolation of Reachwind, from the concealed passage of Deepwood Vale to the overlooked systems beneath Riften. These places aren't just hidden because they're hard to find. They're hidden because nothing points you towards them. They exist without asking to be discovered. And that's what makes them different. Because in a game filled with quests, markers, and direction, these locations remind you that there are still parts of Skyrim that don't revolve around you as the player. Places that carry on untouched whether you find them or not. And maybe that's the most interesting part. Not that they're hidden, but that the world never needed you to see them in the first place. Some horrors in Skyrim are shouted. You see the dragons, hear the war horns, read the names in your quest log. But Others happen quietly, beneath trees, beside water, just far enough off the path that you could walk past them a dozen times and never notice them. One such place lies just southwest of the Guardian Stones, the first blessing point most new players find. From the road hugging Lake Ilinalta, if you veer into the woods just 50 paces from the trail, you'll find a Talos shrine. But this is not a place of peace. The statue is chipped, the altar is soaked in old blood, bones are strewn across the forest floor, a necromancer stands guard, not an enemy, but a fixture. Always there, always silent until you disturb them. There's no quest, no marker, no journal, no dialogue whatsoever. Only an altar where someone died, someone returned, and someone else made sure they stayed that way. Talos shrines in Skyrim are usually proud, built into cliff sides, marked on maps, visited in secret by stormcloaks and Nords who defy the white gold Concordat. But not this one. This shrine sits low, not high. Hidden but not revered. It isn't marked on your map, it isn't referenced by the Civil War questlines or Daedric mission. I wouldn't even really call it a good altar. It has no place in any quest, and yet it exists, active, bloody, and wrong. Its proximity to the Guardian Stones makes it all the more unsettling. This is where the Dragonborn's path begins, where you first choose your standing stone after you've left Helgen. Hope, power, and destiny. And just off that road, forgotten under the trees, is a desecrated altar to the god you're not supposed to mention. Someone found it, someone used it, and someone got killed here. And someone died here. The altar itself is stained, chipped by what looks like blade strikes, and weathered by time. A skeleton rests atop of it, arms spread slightly, one leg curled as if it's collapsed mid-struggle. The bones aren't pristine, some are charred, others are cracked. This wasn't a place of burial, this was a place of use. All around the site are scattered remains, ribs, femurs, skull fragments, not placed ceremonially, but flung, dropped, or discarded. One set of bones lies far from the altar, face down in the leaves. Another is slumped against one of the stone pillars. This is not the aftermath of a single death. This is a pattern. And that altar in the middle, it's not for praying, it's for doing. If you approach the altar, you'll encounter the site's only living inhabitant, a novice necromancer. They don't patrol or wander, they don't talk, they don't even seem surprised you found this place. But if you come too close, they attack, immediately, defensively, and with urgency, as if guarding something they were told never to abandon. Killing them gives you no answers. Their belongings are minor, a staff, low-level robes, maybe a soul gem, no notes, no journal, no clues. And yet their presence makes it clear. This place isn't forgotten, it's still being used, or at least maintained. Like a trap, no one disarmed. The arrangement of this place feels unfinished. The altar isn't scorched completely, the bones aren't fresh, but they're not ancient either. The necromancer isn't powerful, but they're vigilant. This may have been a summoning ritual, or a binding one, or an execution cloaked in spellcraft. But nothing about this scene says done. It feels like someone walked away mid-spell, or like the magic failed and the bodies were left behind as a warning, or a reminder. And Skyrim doesn't tell you what it's for, it just leaves the room locked and the door open. Lake Ilinalta is more than beautiful scenery. It's a lake full of sunken temples, drowned crypts, and forgotten ruins. To the west is Ilinalta's Deep, a necromancer-infested ruin. Nearby is a sunken shrine, and to the north lies the Lady Stone, another site steeped in mysticism. And then there's this site. It's not tied to any of them. It's not part of a questline or a Radiant encounter. But it echoes the same theme. Ritual gone wrong. Magic cast without oversight. Power sought in silence. Ilinalta doesn't just hold water. It holds secrets as well. But who really performed the ritual? There are no names at this site, no cult banners, no evidence of Daedric worship or a specific faction. But someone did this. Some theories say it's a rogue mage from the College of Winterhold, expelled for unethical practices. Others think it was a Blade's exile, trying to raise fallen allies from the dead. A few speculate it's related to the Mythic Dawn, whose members still hide in pockets across Skyrim. The lack of detail makes the site feel more personal. This isn't a world event, it's someone's mistake, and you walked in after it was too late to undo it. But maybe it was that novice necromancer that you killed to try and get here. But surely they couldn't even pull off something this weird. The Elder Scrolls games are famous for environmental storytelling. Notes, blood trails, overturned cups that suggest struggle. But this site offers none of that. No prompts really, no instructions. Only one journal is nearby, but it doesn't give you any sort of information at all. And in that void, the player is forced to do something rare in Skyrim. Feel uncertain. Most places in Skyrim are knowable. Quest markers, loot, objectives. But here, you're left with only emotion, unease, tension, and curiosity. The site doesn't explain itself, because it doesn't need to. It knows what it's doing to you. What makes this place so terrifying isn't the necromancer. It's the fact that it feels alive, even after you've cleared it. The stones don't glow, the skeleton doesn't rise, nothing explodes. But something lingers. The shape of the ritual, the arrangement of the bones, the way your footsteps seem louder here. The feeling that if you return a few days later, it might look different. Skyrim rarely plays with spaces that watch you back. This one does, quietly. On forums and lore threads, this site does come up quite often. Some players think it's a cut quest site, a leftover from a necromancer plotline that never made it to launch. Others swear it was meant to be part of a Dawnguard subplot, tied to soul trapping or vampire experiments. Still, others believe it's nothing, just a little pocket of ambience. But if you've been here, you know better. It's too precise, too intentional. This wasn't decoration, this was deliberate. And it's that deliberateness, paired with the lack of explanation, that makes it so unforgettable. You leave the ritual site behind. The forest returns to quiet. The road takes you toward Falkreath or Riverwood. But part of you stays. You keep thinking about the bones, the altar, the circle, and how no one else in the world seems to care. No townsfolk reference it, no bounty lists it, no companion questions it. It's as if the ritual was never there at all. But you saw it, and you don't forget things like this. You return to the road, the Guardian stones shimmer in the distance, Lake Ilinalta gleams nearby, but the world carries on. But something in the woods behind you still waits. Bones still scatter the leaves, the altar still stands, and somewhere in the space between spells and memory, the ritual still echoes. Because Skyrim's greatest terrors don't always roar. Sometimes they wait, and sometimes they whisper. Skyrim is a province haunted by loneliness. Its wilderness is littered with ruined towers, forgotten villages, and shacks left to rot. But while places can be desolate, people within Skyrim often remain tied to their communities, however small or broken. Farmers toil beside their families, miners share fireside meals, even beggars find their corners of the city alive with noise. True human abandonment, where someone is left entirely severed from others, is rare. And then there is this one person, a scholar of Dwemer lore, once respected and possibly tied to the College of Winterhold. He is now little more than a ghost in human form. His exile to a frozen shack north of Winterhold on the Sea of Ghosts is not just geographic, it is emotional, intellectual, and spiritual. He has been cut off from his peers, ignored by the college, used by a Daedric prince, and left to spiral into madness. Unlike hermits who seek solitude for peace, this person's isolation is a punishment of obsession. He has been abandoned by society, by the gods, and finally by his own mind. To understand Septimus, one must first grasp the symbolism of his location. His ice cave is perched far north of Winterhold, closer to the endless sea of ghosts than to any human settlement. There are no roads, no signs of trade, not even an abandoned village nearby. He exists literally outside the map of civilization. Other reclusive NPCs at least linger near society. Nafi the beggar in Iverstead is shunned yet surrounded by villagers. Miko's deceased master in his shack in the woods died alone, but his home sits within walking distance of towns and hunters. Even Anise, the witch in her riverside cabin, still lives near roads where travellers may stumble upon her. Septimus is unique. He has placed himself on a patch of ice so far north that the world forgets him. This physical exile is not accidental. It represents how thoroughly he has been abandoned. While most NPCs remind the player of Skyrim's network of relationships, Septimus's location makes it clear. He has no ties, no allies, no family, and no future. When the Dragonborn finally meets him, his state of mind leaves no doubt that his abandonment is not only social, but psychological as well. His dialogue is fractured, full of contradictions, as if he speaks to himself more than to others. He references thoughts and concepts half-formed, as though the burden of forbidden knowledge has broken his ability to communicate. This mental collapse is what separates him from other figures. The Greybeards live in chosen silence, but remain sane and deliberate. Hermits across Skyrim often speak with clarity, grounded in either religious devotion or survivalist logic. Septimus, by contrast, is neither. His words reveal a man fractured by obsession, enslaved to knowledge he cannot control. Scholars thrive on discourse, on debate, on teaching. But Septimus has none of this. No one listens, no one even comes to see him. No one answers, and eventually his thoughts consume themselves. The result is a man abandoned not only by his peers, but by his own capacity to function in the world. As though mortal abandonment was not enough, Septimus's greatest tragedy is his manipulation by Hermaeus Mora, the Daedric prince of forbidden knowledge. Septimus believes himself chosen. He imagines that his discoveries are his own, that he has been singled out for a destiny greater than any mortal could achieve. In reality, Mora is merely stringing him along, using him as a temporary vessel for collecting information. His obsession with the Dwemer lockbox is not his triumph, but his trap. When the Dragonborn steps into the role of Mora's new agent, Septimus's fate is sealed. Mora abandons him in an instant, no longer needing his service. For a man who believed knowledge was his divine calling, the realization, or perhaps lack of realization, that he was merely a pawn is devastating. He dies not with glory, but with indifference, disintegrating into dust in the cave that has already become his tomb. This abandonment is cosmic. It is not simply that his colleagues left him, or his mind betrayed him. Even the god he worshipped cast him aside. And few characters in Skyrim face betrayal on this scale. Septimus's link to the college is never explicitly detailed, but his knowledge of the Elder Scrolls and Dwemer studies make it almost certain he once belonged there. His skills would have been invaluable in a place dedicated to magical learning, and yet the college never mentions him. No student remembers his teachings. No master acknowledges his disappearance. His name is absent from all conversation within Winterhold's ruined halls. This silence is telling that Septimus is not remembered as a tragic figure, not even whispered as a cautionary tale. He has been erased by omission. For a scholar whose greatest ambition would have been recognition of his work, this neglect is the cruelest form of abandonment. He was not cast out in scandal or remembered as a warning. He was simply just forgotten, as though he never existed at all. The ice cave itself mirrors his existence. It is crude, battered, and devoid of comfort. A single fire burns, books and scrolls lie scattered, and the great Dwemer lockbox looms in the corner like a coffin waiting to be opened. Unlike inns or farmhouses, it is not a place of life. Unlike hunter cabins or mage retreats, it is not a place of work or survival. It is a prison, both literal and symbolic. Septimus cannot leave because his obsession binds him to the lockbox. He is its caretaker, its watchman, and its victim. When he finally dies, the cave does not change. It remains frozen on the ice, an abandoned place reflecting its abandoned master. To stumble upon it after his death is unsettling. The fire still burns, but the man is gone, erased as thoroughly as if he had never lived there at all. And the cave becomes a ghostly reminder of the most abandoned man in Skyrim. The Dragonborn's interaction with Septimus is brief compared to the scale of Skyrim's adventures. They arrive, they listen, they aid him in his tasks, yet their presence only highlights his loneliness. For a short time, Septimus has contact with another person, perhaps the first in years, but even this is hollow. The Dragonborn is not his friend nor his saviour. They are his tool, just as he is Hermaeus Mora's tool. When his usefulness ends, the Dragonborn cannot save him. They can only watch as he disintegrates, leaving nothing behind. The player's role as witness underscores the tragedy. Septimus's abandonment is so complete that even the protagonist of Skyrim, the most powerful figure in Tamriel, cannot alter his fate. Perhaps the greatest tragedy of Septimus's loneliness lies in what it could have been. His knowledge of the Elder Scrolls and Dwemer technology places him in the most brilliant minds of his age. He could have been a leading figure at the college, guiding generations of students. He could have contributed to Skyrim's understanding of magic and history. He could have written books, shaped debates, or even served rulers with his insight. Instead, his genius curled into obsession. His isolation prevented collaboration. His fixation closed him off from dialogue. And his devotion to a Daedric prince consumed his sanity. All his potential ended in ashes on the floor of his cave. Abandoned by others, abandoned by himself, and abandoned by the god he trusted, Septimus is the embodiment of wasted brilliance. In the end, Septimus Signus is the most abandoned NPC in Skyrim, because he is abandoned in every possible sense. His cave is abandoned on the ice, his mind abandoned by reason, his body abandoned by the Daedra, his memory abandoned by the college. He leaves no descendants, no allies, no students, and no legacy. He leaves only a cave that few will ever find and fewer will ever care about. His tragedy is not one of violent death or battlefield glory. It is the slow suffocation of neglect, obsession, and cosmic indifference. And that is why Septimus Signus, mad scholar of the Elder Scrolls, deserves the title as the most abandoned NPC in all of Skyrim. What makes a place truly hidden in Skyrim isn't always whether it's difficult to find. Sometimes it's about how the game treats it, how it separates certain locations from the rest of the world through atmosphere, distance, silence, even abandonment. Some places are concealed physically, buried deep within mountains or hidden behind paths most players never think to follow. Others are concealed emotionally, locations that feel disconnected from normal Skyrim life, operating on a completely different tone from everything else around them. And some become hidden over time, slowly fading into the background as the world moves on without them. That's what makes these places so memorable, because they don't just feel isolated, they feel removed, like pieces of Skyrim that exist slightly outside the main world, waiting quietly for players willing to slow down and look closer. And once you start noticing these places, it changes the way you explore the game entirely. You stop focusing only on the obvious landmarks and major cities. You start paying attention to strange paths, hidden entrances, forgotten ruins, and locations the game barely draws attention to. Because Skyrim hides some of its most interesting places in plain sight. Not through invisible walls or impossible secrets, but through subtlety, through locations that don't demand your attention, even though they absolutely deserve it. And that's why these concealed places leave such a strong impression. They feel personal to discover, like you weren't just following a quest marker, but uncovering something the world had quietly tucked away from everything else. Something easy to miss, but impossible to forget once you finally find it. Skyrim is full of settlements that demand your attention. Whiterun welcomes you into its bustling market and towering Dragon Reach. Riften draws you into webs of crime and corruption. Even the smallest villages, Riverwood, Iverstead, Dawnstar, call to you with quests, rumours or troubled locals. And then there's Stone Hills, a tiny mining hamlet nestled in the snow, little more than a cluster of wooden huts beside the yawning mouth of Rockwallow Mine. Stone Hills is one of Skyrim's most obscure settlements. Many players will never see it, others will pass through it once, grab a side bounty and never return. But for those who linger, Stone Hills reveals itself as one of the loneliest places in all of Skyrim. A community defined not by what it has, but by what it lacks. No inn, no shops, no quests of consequence. Only miners, their shacks, and the endless dark of the mine. It is a settlement that feels less like a town and more like a half-forgotten outpost clinging to survival. And in that way, it becomes one of the most fascinating places in Skyrim to examine. Stone Hills sits in the frozen wilds of Jarlmarch, not far from Morthal. But while Morthal, for all its tragedy and swampy gloom, serves as a capital town with guards, a Jarl, and quests, Stone Hills feels more like a side note on the map. Its structures are bare, a few small homes, a smithing area, and the mine itself. There is no tavern to welcome travellers, no temple to gather the faithful, no market to trade. For a settlement that supports a working mine, it feels strangely empty of life and amenities. This emptiness immediately marks Stone Hills as different. It does not pretend to be a full town, nor does it reach for the narrative significance of other mining communities like Shaw's Stone or Darkwater Crossing. But even then, those two places also feel a little left out of Skyrim's full main story. Instead, it sits in silence, a quiet cluster of families with little to offer the Dragonborn except awe and bleak conversation. At the centre of Stone Hills lies Rockwallow Mine, the source of its existence and the reason anyone lives here at all. Like many mines in Skyrim, it provides ore, in this case iron, that fuels the province's economy and supplies weapons for the Civil War. But unlike other mines, Rockwallow Mine feels strangely hollow. There is little danger inside, no dramatic backstory of bandits or dragger, no hidden Daedric artifact waiting to be uncovered. It is simply a mine, dark, cold, repetitive. For the Dragonborn who spend so much of their journey uncovering secrets and slaying monsters, Rockwallow Mine is startling in its banality. And yet that very ordinariness makes it feel lonelier than any Dragger crypt. At least the crypts tell stories of ancient Nords and forgotten kings. Here the story is simply the day-to-day grind of miners who will never be remembered. Stone Hills is home to a small handful of NPCs, most notably Sorli the Builder and her husband Pacta. Together they oversee the mine's operations on behalf of the Empire, ensuring the ore keeps flowing to supply the war effort. Alongside them live their children and a few workers scraping out an existence in the harsh wilderness. Unlike other settlements, the people here have little to say. They don't offer radiant quests beyond minor work, they don't share rumours of grand adventures, and they certainly don't dream of anything else beyond survival. They live day after day by the rhythm of the mine. This lack of depth can feel disappointing to the player, but it also creates a powerful sense of realism. Not every Skyrim villager is tied into the threads of destiny. Some are simply people living unremarkable lives, forgotten by the world outside their little hamlet. And in Stone Hills, that is precisely the tragedy. These miners exist, but they will never matter. Despite its obscurity, Stone Hills does brush against the great events of Skyrim through the Civil War questline. Depending on which side the Dragonborn supports, control of Rockwallow Mine can shift. The Empire values it as a resource, the Stormcloaks may fight for it in turn. Sorli and Pacta themselves voice loyalty to the Empire, sending ore to Solitude to feed General Tullius's war machine. But even here, Stone Hills feels incidental. The mine matters only as a line of supply, not as a place where lives and struggles unfold. It is reduced to a resource point on a strategic map, stripped of its individuality. This transforms Stone Hills into a haunting metaphor. Even when it is noticed not for its people, but for what can be extracted from its earth. Stone Hills becomes even more striking when compared to Skyrim's other mining communities, like Shaw's Stone, Darkwater Crossing, and Karth Wasteland. Shaw's Stone has ties to the Thieves' Guild and a mine contested by dangerous enemies. Darkwater Crossing is defined by tragedy with survivors of Helgen trying to rebuild their lives. Karth Wasteland serves as a flashpoint for the Silverblood family's ruthless expansion. Each of these towns, though small, are still given some sort of narrative weight, even though they're still lonely in themselves. Their minds tell small stories of exploitation, danger, or recovery. Stone Hills, in contrast, feels like a mind stripped of a story. Its only identity is labour and silence. It does not cry out for help. It does not beg the Dragonborn to intervene. It simply exists, lonely and untouched. Perhaps the most powerful feature of Stone Hills is its silence. There are no bustling streets, no chatter of markets, no drunken songs from taverns. The soundscape is reduced to the crunch of snow, the crack of a pickaxe in the mine, and the occasional sigh of wind across the frozen tundra. For players who stumble upon it, this silence can feel almost unsettling. Skyrim is a world brimming with constant noise, dragons roaring, Nords brawling, and merchants shouting. To enter Stone Hills is to enter a pocket of emptiness. That emptiness in turn makes it one of the most loneliest places in Skyrim. Stone Hills occupies a peculiar role in Skyrim's design. It is a named settlement large enough to appear on the map, with unique NPCs and a functioning economy, and yet it is treated with the narrative weight of an unmarked farmstead. In many ways, it feels like content the developers left unfinished. A town sketched onto the canvas but never really painted, with a lot of quests or stories. The fact that it exists at all feels kind of accidental, as though Bethesda couldn't quite decide whether to make it a real village or leave it as a background dressing. This in-betweenness contributes to its air of forgotten loneliness. It is a town that barely exists in the eyes of both the world and the player. When the Dragonborn enters Stone Hills, what do they really feel? For many, it's a brief stop, perhaps a bounty quest sends them here, or they wander by on the way to another destination. The player mines a little ore, speaks briefly with Sorley or Pacta, and then moves on. But for those who pause, the atmosphere begins to seep in. The stark snowfields, the small homes huddled together, the endless grind of the mine, and the lack of anything beyond survival. The result is a settlement that feels profoundly lonely to inhabit. Players often leave quickly not because of the danger, but because there is simply nothing to hold them here. When all is said and done, Rockwallow Mine and Stone Hills embodies the concept of loneliness more than almost any other place in Skyrim. It is not lonely because of ghosts or tragedy. It is lonely because of neglect. Neglect by the developers, neglect by the game's narrative, and neglect by the Dragonborn, who rarely stops long enough to notice it. It is a mine that exists without purpose beyond labour, and a town without identity beyond its ore, and a community without recognition beyond a single line on the map. In a game filled with legends, gods, dragons, and quests of world-shattering scale, Stone Hills is a reminder of the other side of Skyrim, the forgotten lives of those who mine, survive, and pass into obscurity without ever shaping history. Stone Hills may be the loneliest mine in Skyrim, but that loneliness makes it strangely powerful. It reminds us that not every settlement is destined for greatness. Some exist only to endure. Some communities live and die without songs or sagas, and their work is swallowed by the silence of snow. In this way, Stone Hills feels almost more real than the grander cities of Skyrim. It is not a stage for adventure, it is a background detail of a world that does not revolve around the Dragonborn. And perhaps that, more than anything, is why it lingers in the minds of players who do stop to notice it. Stone Hills stands eternal, a lonely hamlet in the snow, clinging to its mine, forgotten by all, but the pickaxes echoing in the dark. There's a certain sound that pulls you in long before you reach the mouth of this mine. It's not the ring of a pickaxe or the cheerful chatter of miners hauling in another day's pay. No, what you hear is quieter, sharper. The crack of a bowstring in the distance, the whistle of an arrow splitting the air, and then silence. When you round the final bend and see the main entrance for the first time, the smell of iron is thick, not from the ore, but from the blood soaking the dirt. The camp is littered with corpses. Workers lie where they fell, their tools still in their hand. The enemy isn't hiding deep within the tunnels. They're waiting for you just beyond the entrance. Bows drawn, axes ready, gold gleaming in the light. This is Colsager Mine, and it's not just the richest gold deposit in all of Skyrim. It's a place where entering means making a choice. You're either going to clear it, or it's going to clear you. Colsager Mine sits in the Reach, just east of Markarth, and perched above the treacherous road to Old Riften. The area itself already carries the danger of its hold. The rocky terrain makes for perfect ambush spots, and Forsworn patrols often roam nearby. The mine is unmistakable from the road. A weathered wooden bridge spans a narrow gorge leading up to the entrance. Even before you step foot inside, the place feels isolated, almost exposed. Its height gives you a good view of the valley, but it also makes you a perfect target for anyone lying in wait. It's not like the other mines scattered across Skyrim. Iron mines, corundum mines, even silver mines. They can be dangerous, sure, but they don't carry the reputation that Colsager does. Because everyone knows who holds this mine. The Forsworn. And they are not here to trade. In Skyrim, gold ore is surprisingly rare. For the average smith, the thought of having access to enough gold to forge dozens of rings or amulets is almost mythical. Colsager, however, contains the single largest gold deposit in the province. Over a dozen veins of pure ore tucked into the dark tunnels. That kind of wealth doesn't go unnoticed. Historically, Colsager was worked by miners from Markarth under the authority of the Silverblood family, whose grip on the Reach's resources is practically legendary. But gold, unlike silver, holds a different kind of allure. For the Forsworn, it's not just about wealth. It's about taking something from their enemies. Every ounce of gold they mine here is an ounce stolen from the Nords they despise. By the time you arrive, they've already overrun the place. The miners are dead or fled. The inside is crawling with armed Forsworn who know every corner and choke point. The gold is still here, but it's not yours quite yet. If you're sent to Colsager by Pavo, a miner who escaped the attack, you'll know what to expect. If you find it on your own, you might think it's just another job. Kill a few bandits, clear the place out. But Colsager doesn't fight fair. The first two Forsworn you encounter are perfectly positioned to catch you in crossfire, one with a bow and one with a rushing blade. The mine's narrow entrance means you have no room to dodge, and the clutter of barrels and carts makes movement very tricky. Once inside, the corridors tighten. There's no line of sight, no clean angles, just twisting pathways that force you into close combat. And the Forsworn are nothing if not aggressive. They'll push, they'll flank, and if you're unlucky, you'll be caught in a corner with a Briarheart, swinging a two-handed weapon. Many players underestimate the difficulty here, but Colsager, unlike most small mines, wants you to underestimate it. It wants you to think it's just another skirmish, and then it crushes you. The most dangerous enemy in Colsager is the Forsworn Briarheart, a warrior magically altered to replace his heart with a Haggraven's dark magic. These are not mere men. They are living weapons, faster, stronger, and far more resistant to pain than the average Forsworn fighter. In many ways, the Briarheart is the symbol of Colsager's danger. He doesn't just guard the gold, he stands as a reminder that the Forsworn are not a disorganized rabble. They are coordinated, ritualistic, and willing to twist themselves into monsters for power. The Briarheart fights like he knows the tunnels better than you ever will. He'll use the narrow corridors to his advantage, forcing you to backpedal into other enemies. He doesn't need to rush. You'll come to him eventually. Because the mine's design funnels you into his lair. And when you finally strike him down, you've won the mine, at least until the Forsworn return. Colsegger Mine is most famously tied to the quest Clear Colsegger Mine, given by Pavo. It's straightforward: kill every Forsworn inside so that the miners can return to work. But here's the thing, the quest changes the mine in a way few locations in Skyrim do. Once you've cleared it, the Forsworn don't immediately respawn. The miners move back in and start working on the gold veins, and the place feels alive again. For a while. Eventually, the Forsworn do return, and when they do, it's another bloodbath, undoing everything you fought for. There's no permanent victory here, only temporary reclamation. Colsegger Mine is dangerous not because of one battle, but because it's a cycle. No matter who holds it, someone will always want it back. Colsegger's location isn't just remote, it's symbolic. Markarth is the stronghold of Nordic rule in the Reach, a city literally carved into Dwemer stone, representing centuries of control over the land the Forsworn believe is rightfully theirs. Colsegger sits far enough from the city to be vulnerable. Every day the Forsworn hold it is a day that they defy the authority of Markarth. For the player, this means the mine isn't just a loot spot, it's a front line. You're stepping into a fight that's been going on for generations, and you're not ending it. You're just picking a side for a single battle. And Colsegger, it will still remember. Even after you clear the Forsworn, Colsegger feels uneasy. The bodies of miners lie where they fell, some still clutching pickaxes, others sprawled on the ground outside. There's no scripted funeral, no burial, their deaths are permanent, their names forgotten. The mine's tunnels are dimly lit, the walls jagged with gold that seem almost to gleam in mockery. The deeper you go, the quieter it gets, until all you hear is the echo of your own footsteps and the occasional drip of water from the ceiling. It's not just a dangerous place, it's an oppressive one. And when you walk out into the Reach's grey skies, the relief you feel is immediate. You survived. This time. Colsegger Mine is one of the best places in Skyrim to mine gold. A dedicated player can walk out with enough ore to smelt dozens of ingots, which can then be turned into jewelry for smithing experience or sold for a tidy profit. This makes it one of the most rewarding and therefore tempting locations in the game. But that temptation is part of the danger. Players often approach it early, thinking they can handle it, only to be quickly overwhelmed. The irony? Many never return after that first failed attempt, leaving the gold and the mine to the Forsworn indefinitely. Colsegger doesn't care about your ambition. It buries the greedy just as quickly as it buries the careless. Other dangerous mines exist in Skyrim. Gloombound Mine with its ore stronghold, Blind Cliff Mine infested with hagravens, and Embershard Mine often ambushing early players. But none combine high-value resources with high-risk enemies, quite like Colsegger. It's the perfect storm: valuable loot, strong opponents, a location tied to ongoing political conflict, and environmental hazards. Most mines are dangerous once. Colsegger is dangerous forever. And unlike mines tucked inside safe holds, Colsegger's isolation means that if you fall here, no guards are coming. Colsegger Mine isn't the biggest dungeon. It's not the most complex, but it stays with you. Maybe it's the image of the dead miners. Maybe it's the sheer brutality of the Forsworn. Maybe it's the realization that in Skyrim, no amount of gold can keep you safe. Whatever it is, Colsegger feels personal. The fight for it is raw and close. The reward is tangible, the cost is steep. It's a place where you don't just measure victory by loot, but by whether you walk out alive. When you leave the mine for the last time, whether it be with Miko at your side, a pack full of gold, or empty-handed and bruised, one thing is certain: you've stepped into a battle older than you. The Forsworn will return, the miners will die, the gold will remain, and the hill will keep its reputation. Because in the end, Colsegger isn't just the richest mine in Skyrim, it's also the most dangerous. And it always will be waiting for you. Skyrim's mines are supposed to be a place of work. Simple, practical spaces where people dig, gather resources, and move on. But that's not always what they become, because beneath the surface, far away from cities and guards, These places are vulnerable, easy to take over, easy to forget. And once something moves in, it rarely leaves. Spiders nest in the dark corners, Falmer carve out entire underground networks, and bandits can turn work sites into hideouts. What was once built for survival slowly becomes something else entirely. Something hostile, something claimed. And the deeper you go, the more it feels like these mines don't belong to Skyrim's people anymore. They belong to whatever got there first and refused to leave. Bile Gulch Mine is one of the clearest examples in Skyrim of how a place designed for simple, practical use can be completely overtaken and redefined by whatever decides to settle inside it, turning something ordinary into something controlled, hostile, and entirely removed from its original purpose. Located in the rocky tundra between Falkreath and Markarth, it doesn't stand out at first glance. It looks like any other mine scattered across the province. A small operation carved out into the landscape, with a few buildings signifying what is infesting there. This place is likely intended for resource gathering, quiet labour and steady output. But the moment you approach it, that expectation immediately starts to fall apart. Because Bile Gulch Mine isn't functioning as a mine anymore. It's a functioning stronghold. And more specifically, it's been claimed by a group of orc bandits who have turned the entire space into something far more structured and territorial than your typical roadside hideout. This isn't a temporary occupation or a loose gathering of enemies. It feels deliberate, reinforced, almost organised in a way that reflects orc stronghold culture, but twisted into something more aggressive and exclusionary. The exterior alone gives that impression. Barricades, watch positions, and a clear sense of control over the surrounding area makes it obvious that this isn't just a place they're hiding. It's a place they're defending. And that distinction is important because it changes how the mine is perceived. It's no longer just a location with enemies in it. It's territory, something that has been taken, reshaped, and now exists under entirely different rules than it was originally built for. Once you move inside, that feeling only intensifies. The mine's layout, like many others in Skyrim, is relatively straightforward, but the presence of the orc bandits transforms how it's experienced. Every corridor feels occupied, every open space feels watched. And the deeper you go, the more it becomes clear that this place has been adapted to support those living within it. There's a sense of permanence to it, as if this isn't just a temporary raid site, but a long-term base of operations. And that permanence is what makes it feel truly infested. Because infestation in this context isn't just about enemies being present, it's about replacement. The original function of the space has been completely overwritten. Whatever mining operation once existed here is irrelevant. The tools, the layout, the structure, all of it has been repurposed to serve something else. And that something else is control. The orc bandits don't just occupy this mine, they define it. Their presence dictates how the space functions, how it's navigated, and how it's perceived. There's no trace of its previous identity left in any meaningful way. And that transformation is what sets it apart from other infested locations. In many mines across Skyrim, you'll see remnants of their original purpose. Miners' belongings, partially used equipments, signs of a recent disruption. In Bile Gulch Mine, that sense of transition is largely gone. It doesn't feel like something that was recently taken over. It feels like something that has already been claimed and settled, with no intention of returning to what it once was. The orc presence also adds a unique layer to this idea, because unlike creatures like Falmer or spiders, who are often portrayed as inherently tied to the environments they inhabit, orcs bring with them a cultural identity. Their strongholds in Skyrim are structured, hierarchical, and bound by specific traditions. Bile Gulch Mine reflects a distorted version of that. It has the structure, the sense of hierarchy, the defensive mindset, but without the legitimacy or recognition of an official stronghold. It's what happens when that culture is removed from its proper context and forced into a space that wasn't meant for it at all. And that creates a kind of tension within the location. It feels organised but not stable, controlled but not really legitimate. Like something that exists on the edge of Skyrim's social structure, acknowledged only as a problem to be dealt with rather than a place to be understood. This ties into the broader idea of infestation as something that exists outside of the accepted systems of the world. Bile Gulch Mine isn't part of any hold's infrastructure. It doesn't contribute resources, doesn't support a settlement, doesn't serve any purpose beyond sustaining those who have taken over it. It's isolated, self-contained, and entirely disconnected from the systems that define the rest of Skyrim. And that isolation reinforces that feeling that this is something that has ultimately slipped through the cracks. A place that once lost is simply written off rather than reclaimed. Solion's Sinkhole is a place where the player ultimately gets surprised by what has overtaken it, feeling like an intrusion from something ancient, something that was already there long before the mine existed, waiting beneath the surface. Located in the Reach just north of Old Roldan Inn, it begins like many other mining operations in the province, a small, functional site carved into the landscape, built with a clear purpose and supported by workers trying to make a living. There's nothing outwardly unusual about it at first. It's modest, grounded, entirely tied to the present. But that sense soon quickly starts to unravel the moment you step inside. Because what defines the sinkhole isn't what the miners built, it's what they uncovered. Unlike other mines that are taken over by bandits or creatures moving in from the outside, this is a case where the danger comes from below, from something buried and undisturbed until the act of mining itself brings it to the surface. The deeper sections of the mine reveal Nordic ruins, and with them the presence of Draga, not as scattered enemies but as a reawakening force tied to the ancient dead. This changes the entire framing of the location. The mine wasn't simply lost or abandoned, it was disrupted. The miners didn't fail to defend it, they accidentally unearthed something they were never meant to find. And once that line was crossed, there was no reclaiming it without confrontation of what had been awakened. What makes this especially effective is how the transition is handled. Much like Darkwater Pass, there isn't a single moment where everything changes. Instead, it's gradual. The mine begins to feel less like a place of work and more like a threshold. Wooden supports and mining equipment give way to stone architecture, carved walls and burial chambers that clearly belong to a much older world. And unlike Falmer tunnels which reshape and adapt, the Nordic ruin beneath Solion's Sinkhole feels preserved, untouched until recently. The Draga aren't building anything new. I don't think they really could anyway. They're reclaiming what was always theirs. And that distinction creates a very different kind of tension. This isn't a place being transformed into something else. It's a place reverting back to what it once was, with the miners' presence reduced to a brief interruption in a much longer timeline. The Draga themselves reinforce this idea through their behaviour and placement. They aren't wandering aimlessly or occupying the mine in a disorganised way. They are positioned within the structure of the ruin, guarding it, moving through it with a sense of purpose that feels tied to something older than the current world. When they spill into the mine's upper sections, it doesn't feel like an expansion. It feels like a spillover, like a coffee that was poured too far over the brim of the mug, as if the boundary between the ancient and the present has been broken. And that's where the real unease comes from, because this place doesn't feel like it's been taken over by external force. It feels like it's been opened up to something that was always there, just waiting beneath the surface, much like the Falmer in Darkwater Pass. This also gives the location a different kind of narrative weight compared to the other overrun mines. In places like Bile Gulch Mine, the transformation is visible and immediate. A group takes control, reshapes the space, and establishes dominance. In Darkwater Pass, the change is environmental and systematic, a slow absorption into something alien. But in Solian's sinkhole, the change is temporal. It's about layers of history colliding. The mine represents the present, fragile and temporary, while the ruin beneath represents the past, enduring and unyielding. And when those two layers intersect, the result isn't coexistence, it's displacement. The present gives way to the past almost effortlessly. Even the structure of the mine supports this idea. It doesn't feel particularly deep or expansive at first, but once the ruin is revealed, the sense of scale shifts. The space beneath feels older, more significant, as if the mine was only ever scratching the surface of something much larger. And that imbalance makes the upper sections feel small in comparison, almost insignificant. The miners weren't uncovering a resource, they were uncovering a tomb, a piece of history that was never meant to be disturbed. And in doing so, they effectively erased their own claim to the space. The sinkhole ultimately stands out because it doesn't show a mine being lost. It shows how easily the present can be overwritten by the past in Skyrim. It's not about invasion or control, but about rediscovery in the worst possible sense. A reminder that much of the province is built on top of something older, something buried, and that digging too deep doesn't always lead to progress. Sometimes it just uncovers what was meant to stay hidden. And once that happens, the mine itself isn't just dangerous. It's no longer yours at all. Darkwater Pass doesn't feel like a place that was simply taken over. It feels like a place that was consumed slowly and completely, until whatever it used to be no longer mattered. Located near Darkwater Crossing in the Rift, it begins with a sense of being familiar. The entrance suggests a mine, or at least a very functional tunnel carved with purpose, something tied to the surface world and the people who live there. But that sense of normalcy doesn't last long. The deeper you move into Darkwater Pass, the more the environment shifts, not abruptly, but gradually, in a way that feels almost invasive. Wooden supports and man-made structures begin to give way to damp stone, bioluminescent growths, and the unmistakable signs of Falmer presence. It's not just that enemies appear, it's that the space itself begins to change identity. You're not entering a mine with Falmer in it, you're entering a Falmer domain that has absorbed a mine. That distinction is what defines Darkwater Pass, because the Falmer don't just occupy spaces, they reshape them. Their presence isn't surface level or temporary, it's systematic. The tunnels twist in ways that feel less engineered and more organic, as if the original layout has been altered over time to suit something else entirely. Charus nests line the walls, adding another layer of discomfort, not just visually, but conceptually as well. These creatures aren't just companions to the Falmer, they're part of the same ecosystem, reinforcing the idea that what's happening here isn't random. It's established, sustained, and deeply rooted. The further you go, the less it feels like you're exploring a location, and the more it feels like you're descending into something that has been building itself for a long time without interruption. What makes this especially effective is how subtle the transition is, creating a kind of overlap where it becomes difficult to separate what was built by humans and what has been altered by what came after. The blurring of boundaries is what gives Darkwater Pass its unsettling tone. It's not just a place that was lost, it's a place that was overwritten. The original purpose hasn't just been abandoned, it's been erased, replaced by something that doesn't resemble it in any meaningful way. Darkwater Pass doesn't feel temporary, it feels permanent, like whatever claim the surface once had over this space has been completely lost. It doesn't lead somewhere, it traps you within itself, looping you through a space that has no interest in connection back to the world above. It's a dead end in terms of purpose, but a fully realised system in terms of existence. Now that I've said all this, Darkwater Pass isn't technically a mine, and that's worth acknowledging, because on paper it doesn't belong in this category at all. It's a cave, separate from the structured, purpose-built spaces that define Skyrim's mining operations. But its inclusion here comes from something more contextual than literal. Because when you look at where Darkwater Pass is situated, right beside Darkwater Crossing, an active mining community, it starts to feel like an extension of that same industrial footprint. That kind of place that under slightly different circumstances would have been a mine. The geography lines up, the proximity makes sense. It sits close enough to a settlement built entirely around excavation that it's easy to imagine miners eventually pushing in that direction, expanding their operations, turning the cave into something functional. But that never happens, or more accurately, it can't happen, because whatever potential that space had is already gone, claimed long before it could be repurposed. The Falmer and Charles don't just occupy the cave, they preempt its future. They turn what could have been a site of productivity into something inaccessible, something hostile, something completely cut off from the world. And that's why it still fits here, not because it is a mine, but because it exists right on the edge of becoming one. A missed opportunity shaped entirely by what got there first and refused to leave. Infested before miners could find any sort of resources in there. Colsega Mine is another location where a mine being overrun feels less like random occupation and more like a deliberate act of reclamation, turning what should be a place of labour into something deeply tied to the conflict of the Reach itself. Located just east of Markarth, along the river that cuts through the Karth Valley, Colsega isn't some forgotten or insignificant site. It's a gold mine, valuable, productive, and directly tied to the wealth of the region. Or at least it used to be. By the time you arrive, that value hasn't disappeared, but it has been redirected, because the Forsworn who now occupy the mine haven't just stumbled upon it or taken shelter there. They've taken control of something that represents the very forces they oppose. At first glance, the structure of Colsega still reflects its original purpose. The exterior is open, active in design, with smelters, workstations, and clear signs of an organised mining activity. But that quickly gives way to something more hostile. Forsworn patrol the area, not as scattered enemies, but as a group that clearly understands the terrain and has positioned themselves to defend it. There's a sense of awareness to their presence. They aren't just hiding within the mine, they're asserting control over it and the surrounding land. And that control feels intentional in a way that sets Colsega apart from other locations, like Embashard Mine, where bandits simply take advantage of opportunity. The Forsworn aren't opportunists in the same way. They're ideological. Their presence here carries meaning. That meaning becomes clearer when you consider what Colsega Mine represents within the Reach. The region itself is defined by tension between the Nords who control it and the Forsworn who claim it as their ancestral land. Markarth stands as a symbol of that control, a city built on Dwemer foundations, rich in resources and heavily guarded. The mine, sitting just outside of it, feeds into that same system. It's part of the infrastructure that allows Markarth to thrive. So when the Forsworn take over the mine, it doesn't just disrupt a single location. It disrupts a supply line. It's a direct challenge to the authority that governs the region. Inside the mine, that tension continues to build. The deeper you go, the more it becomes clear that this isn't just a defensive occupation. It's an adaptation of the space itself. The Forsworn don't reshape the mine in the same way Falmer might, nor do they leave it structurally untouched like bandits often do. Instead, there's a blending of identities. The mine's layout remains intact, but its atmosphere shifts. The presence of the Forsworn, with their distinct armour, rituals, and connection to the land, creates a contrast against the industrial nature of this space entirely. It feels like two opposing ideas existing in the same place: extraction versus belonging. The mine was built to take from the land. The Forsworn, in their own way, are trying to reclaim it. This creates a unique kind of discomfort because Colsega Mine doesn't feel like it's being stripped of meaning. It feels like it has been given a different one. The gold is still there, the tunnels still function, but the purpose behind them has changed. It's no longer about production or profit. It's about control, resistance, and presence. The Forsworn aren't mining the gold in any structured sense, but by holding the mine, they're denying it to those who would. And that act alone transforms the space into something political. There's also a noticeable difference in how the location feels compared to the more enclosed or isolated mines. Colsega is relatively open, both outside and its inside sections. Sunlight reaches parts of it. The river runs nearby. It doesn't feel buried or hidden in the same way as other overrun locations. And that openness makes the takeover feel more bold. This isn't something happening in the shadows. It's happening in full view, right on the edge of one of Skyrim's most important cities. The Forsworn aren't concealing their presence. They're making it known. So Colsega Mine isn't just a place that was overrun. It's a place that was contested, taken, and temporarily reclaimed, all within the broader struggle of the region it belongs to. It shows how a mine can become more than just a source of resources. It can become a symbol, a point of tension, a piece of land that means different things to different people. And because of that, its transformation feels more significant than a simple occupation. It's not just about who's inside the mine. It's about what the mine represents and who has the power to decide that. Embershard Mine is one of the first locations most players will ever encounter in Skyrim. And because of that, it's easy to overlook just how telling it is as an example of a mine being completely overrun and repurposed into something far removed from its original intent. Located just outside Helgen, along the road towards Riverwood, it sits directly in the path of your escape from the game's opening sequence. In many ways, it's designed to feel like a natural extension of the tutorial. A simple, approachable dungeon meant to introduce players to basic combat and exploration. But when you stop looking at it as a gameplay tool and instead consider what it represents within the world, Embershard Mine becomes something much more interesting. Because this isn't just a convenient early game encounter, it's a fully overtaken workplace sitting in one of the most trafficked areas in Skyrim, operating in plain sight. At a glance, Embershard still resembles what it once was. The structure is intact, the layout is clear, and there are still visible traces of its function as a mine. But almost immediately that illusion starts to break. The people inside aren't miners, they're bandits. They've wasted no time in turning the space into their own operation. Unlike more remote locations where takeovers can feel isolated or hidden, Embershard Mine exists right next to a major road, within walking distance of Riverwood and not far from Helgen itself. And yet, despite that proximity to civilization, it has been completely claimed by a hostile group with little resistance. That alone says a lot about how vulnerable these places are, especially in the aftermath of chaos like Helgen's destruction. Authority weakens and spaces like this are the first to fall. What makes Embershard stand out is how efficiently it has been repurposed. The bandits haven't just occupied the mine, they've adapted it to suit their needs almost seamlessly. Lookouts are positioned outside, keeping watch over the road. Inside, the layout is used strategically, with choke points, elevated positions, and traps that suggest a level of awareness about how to defend a space. There's even a sense of routine to their presence. Conversations between bandits hint at a familiar nature, at a group that has settled in rather than just passing through. This isn't a temporary hideout, it's a functional base built on top of something that used to serve a completely different purpose. And yet, unlike places such as Bile Gulch Mine, there's no attempt here to establish identity or permanence beyond survival. The bandits aren't trying to build something new, they're simply using what's already there. The mine's infrastructure remains largely unchanged, but its meaning has shifted entirely. Where there was once labour and production, there is now control and opportunism. The tools, the tunnels, the storage areas, all of it has been recontextualized. The mine still functions in a way, but not for the people it was meant to serve. It's been hollowed out conceptually, its purpose replaced without altering its form. This creates an interesting contrast between appearance and reality. This mine looks familiar, almost mundane, especially compared to more dramatic locations in Skyrim. There are no ancient ruins hidden beneath it, no sprawling underground ecosystems, no overwhelming sense of scale. And because of that, it's easy to dismiss it as significant. But that simplicity is exactly what makes it effective. It shows how quickly and quietly a place can be overtaken without needing to be transformed into something unrecognizable. The change doesn't have to be dramatic to be complete. Sometimes all it takes is a shift in who controls the space. There's also something important about its placement so early in the game. Embershard introduces players not just to combat, but to a recurring theme in Skyrim's world, that many of its structures are unstable, constantly shifting between ownership and abandonment. Mines, forts, caves, they don't stay under one group's control for long. They're contested, reclaimed, lost, repurposed over and over again. Embershard Mine is simply the first time you see it happen, and because it's framed as a basic encounter, its implications are easy to miss. But in reality, it sets the tone for how the rest of the world has to operate. Even after clearing it, there's a lingering sense that nothing about the situation is permanent. The mine can be reclaimed, yes, but there's no guarantee it will stay that way. Another group could move in just as easily, and that instability is baked into the location, and to be honest, into the world of Skyrim itself. The mine doesn't present a resolved problem, it presents a cycle. In the end, what makes Embershard Mine one of the most overrun mines and places in Skyrim isn't the scale of its takeover, but how ordinary it feels. There's no spectacle, no dramatic transformation, no hidden depth, just a straightforward example of how quickly something functional can become something hostile. And because it happens so early, so casually, it almost goes unnoticed. But it really shouldn't, because if a mine this close to civilization can be completely overtaken without much resistance, it raises a larger question about the rest of Skyrim. Not how these places fall, but how many of them were never truly secure to begin with. Mines in Skyrim are meant to be some of the most grounded places in the entire world. They're not ancient ruins or hidden cities, they're simply practical, built for one purpose, to work. But that's exactly what makes them so vulnerable. Because once that structure is broken, once the workers leave or something forces them out, these places don't stay empty for long. They get taken, sometimes by bandits looking for easy shelter, sometimes by something far worse lurking beneath the surface, and sometimes by forces that were already there, just waiting to be uncovered. What you're left with are spaces that feel familiar on the inside, but completely changed within. Not abandoned, but claimed. And across Skyrim, some mines stand out more than others, not for what they produce, but for what's taken over instead. In Skyrim, every place has a name. Every ruin has a story. Every cave has a bandit, a necromancer, a ghost with unfinished business. You can pick almost any point on the map and someone, some faction, some book, some loose thread of narrative will eventually guide you there. And yet, some places don't feel like they were ever meant to be found. Some places feel like they slipped through the cracks, built, textured, maybe even plotted out, and then quietly left behind. No quest markers, no radiant objectives, no dialogue hints from a drunken NPC in a tavern, just a name on a map. If you're lucky, a cold, unlabeled door, if you're not. This is one of those places. No one ever tells you to go there, no one even mentions it. But if you wander far enough east of Riften, past the stables, across the river, up the rocky slope towards the edge of the mountain, you might see it. A wooden scaffolding, a crumbling mine entrance. a place the world seems to have forgotten. The Lost Prospect Mine doesn't open with a bang. It's not like Bleak Falls Barrow with its towering arches and blaring music cues. There's no combat encounter waiting at the threshold, no trap to dodge. You walk in and the world just gets quieter. The first room is small, dusty. A minecart is tipped over, gold ore litters the floor, glittering faintly in the gloom. There's a lantern, a pickaxe, and water, the sound of it faint and rhythmic deeper inside. At this point, you're thinking, okay, standard abandoned mine, probably some skeevers, maybe a dead bandit with a journal and a minor treasure. But then you notice something strange. There are no enemies at all. None. Just tunnels and silence. As you move deeper, the mine widens. You reach a larger cavern, water running through it, and a series of ledges above you. There's a broken ladder, a few more carts, and you start to wonder what actually happened here. Why was it abandoned, and why did no one ever come back? And then, in a narrow side chamber, you find him. A corpse. Two corpses, actually. A man and a woman dead, frozen together. Next to him is a letter. It's short, rambling. If you read it and realize this wasn't a mine that was closed by force. It wasn't overrun by spiders or something dark. It was closed because of obsession. The prospector believed there was more gold here, a lot more. His partners didn't believe him, they left, but he stayed. Kept digging, kept dreaming until the dream became all there was. The note ends with something like, "I'm close, I can feel it." And then he died right there. A pickaxe on the floor, a lantern running out of oil, and nothing else to say for him. There's no boss at the end of Lost Prospect Mine. No chest full of rare loot. No artifact waiting on a pedestal. If you climb the ledges above and navigate the broken scaffolds and explore every inch, you'll find a few extra gold veins. But that's it. Just some ore. Which in a game like Skyrim feels strange. Wrong, even. You've been trained to expect more. Big reveal, big reward, big battle. But the Lost Prospect Mine doesn't care about any of that. It gives you a name, a dead man, and a story you have to finish in your own head. And then it gives you nothing else, because that's what obsession leaves behind. Skyrim is loud, in most of the right ways. Dragons scream through the clouds, swords clash, lightning crackles from your fingertips. But every now and then, the game gets quiet. Not just visually, but thematically and emotionally. The Lost Prospect Mine is one of those places. You don't come here for gold, you come here to remember what ambition sounds like after it's burnt out. This mine didn't collapse in a battle. It didn't get swallowed by the war. It wasn't cursed or haunted or corrupted. It was simply forgotten. Like a dream you thought was real until you wake up and realize no one else had it but you. And that maybe is why this place matters so much. Because it doesn't matter. Because someone once believed it did. Skyrim is a game that usually over-explains. It gives you journals, dialogue trees, exposition dumps, quest markers, flashing arrows, and redundant monologues from people who really want to tell you about their missing sword. But this mine doesn't really explain anything. You have to connect to the dots. The prospectors note the layout of the mine, the empty scaffolding, the fact that by the time you reach the deepest point in the cave, the gold is there, but the person who needed to see it never made it. And he was right, there was more gold, but that doesn't matter because he's dead now. And no one else cared enough to come back, not even to bury him. There's a type of location in Skyrim I've started thinking of as a pre-quest. These are places that feel like they were meant to have something tied to them. A Daedric artifact, a moral dilemma, a branching story about trust and betrayal. But for some reason, the part never got written. This location in Skyrim, the Lost Prospect Mine, feels like a pre-quest. You could build a whole story out of it. Maybe the prospector was cursed. Maybe the mine was a front for something darker. Maybe there's more gold, but every time someone comes for it, they vanish. But the game doesn't do that. It leaves the door open. And that's rarer than you think in a game like Skyrim. If you were to draw a map of Skyrim, not just the geography, but the psychology of its places, the Lost Prospect Mine would be a little dot at the edge of ambition. It's about what happens when you believe in something no one else does. It's about digging and digging and digging and never hitting bedrock. It's about thinking that if you just go a little further, if you just try a little harder, you'll eventually get the reward you were promised. And it's about how that promise can kill you. And it's about how the world might never even notice you're gone. Because the mine is so tucked away, so out of the public's eye that no one will ever think to go there other than prospectors. There are players who will never enter the Lost Prospect Mine. They'll walk past it, ride past it, maybe even glance at it while chasing something bigger. And that's okay, because the game doesn't ask you to go there. But that's what makes it feel real, because the world is full of forgotten places. Houses with the lights off, offices with dust on desks, buildings with no footprints in the snow. Not every location gets a headline. Not every place gets a purpose. Some places exist simply because someone once needed them to, and then stopped. In most of Skyrim, gold means something, right? It's currency, it's value, it's the reward. But in the mine, gold is something else. It's the object of fixation, the illusion of purpose, the thing that a man clung to while the rest of the world moved on. And in that context, the gold in the mine isn't a treasure, it's a tombstone. You can mine it if you want, you can even sell it. But part of you knows this wasn't meant for you at all. It was meant for someone who never got to hold it. The Lost Prospect Mine doesn't change. It doesn't scale with your level, it doesn't respawn, it doesn't evolve. It doesn't care if you're level 5 or level 50. You walk in, you see the story, and you walk out. It waits for you, but it doesn't need you. And when you leave, I bet it doesn't miss you either. Which makes it feel more real than half the quest hubs in the game. It's a scar and not a wound. Not everything in Skyrim is meant to be remembered. Some stories don't echo through the taverns, some places don't get marked on your map. Some people live and die between the lines of dialogue, between the cracks in the cave walls, between the radiant events and the dragon fights. The Lost Prospect Mine is one of those places. And maybe that's why I keep thinking about it, because I forgot it once as well. But now, I can't. Skyrim is filled with danger. Dragons circle mountain peaks, Falmer stalk the underground, vampires hide in frozen crypts. But there is one dungeon that feels different. One that does not simply house danger. It is danger. Hidden in the mountains of the Reach, far from the safety of cities, and far from the comfort of main quest lines, lies Valthuma. At first glance, it appears to be just another Nordic ruin. Ancient stone, moss-covered walls, Draga waiting in silence. The kind of place you clear once and forget. But it is not just another tomb. It is a prison, and it's failing. Valthuma is the resting place of Hevnarak, a dragon priest whose name is not spoken with the same reverence or fear as some of the others. But that may be a mistake, because he is not merely powerful, he is patient. Long ago, during the height of the dragon cult, he sought immortality not through loyalty to dragons, but through forbidden alchemical experimentation. His obsession with plague, poison, and unnatural longevity made him feared even among his own kind. The ancient Nords understood something terrifying. Hevnarak was not content with death, so they sealed him away in Valthuma. But they didn't simply entomb him. They built layers of containment, and that is what makes this dungeon different. It is not a resting place, it is a warning. Most Nordic ruins are tombs of reverence, burial chambers for honoured warriors who rise as Draga to defend sacred halls. Valthuma feels wrong from the moment you enter. The architecture is heavy, oppressive. Narrow corridors wind deeper into the earth, as if the structure itself is trying to suffocate whatever lies below. This is not a monument, it is a vault, and like any vault, it has keys. Before you can reach Hevnerak, you must confront and defeat two powerful dragon priest guardians, ancient wardens placed there specifically to prevent resurrection. Their presence reveals something important. The ancient Nords feared what lay beneath more than they feared invasion. They didn't want to honour Hevnerak, they wanted to contain him. That alone elevates this dungeon above most of Skyrim's other dungeons. It was designed with paranoia. What makes Valthuma uniquely dangerous is that the Dragonborn must participate in the very act the ancient Nords sought to prevent. To face Hevnerak, you must complete a ritual. You gather the ceremonial skulls, you unlock inner chambers, you activate the final confrontation. In doing so, you become the final key. This is one of Skyrim's most subtle narrative traps. The dungeon is structured so that the player inadvertently finishes what history tried to stop. The Guardians you defeat were not protecting treasure, they were protecting the world. And once Hevnerak awakens, it becomes clear why. Unlike many dragon priests, Hevnerak specializes in poison and disease. His mask grants immunity to poison and resistance to disease, reflecting his obsession with biological corruption. He is not just a mage, he is a plague bearer. In a world where most enemies rely on brute force, Hevnerak represents something insidious, slow, inevitable decay. Valthuma's location in the Reach is no coincidence. The Reach is already one of Skyrim's most unstable regions. Forsworn rebels wage guerrilla war against Markarth. Dwemer ruins dot the cliffs. Political corruption festers within the city walls. It is a land of old grudges and buried horrors. Placing Valthuma here reinforces its danger. The Reach is symbolic of things buried but never resolved. And beneath it lies a dragon priest who embodies the same theme. Hevnerak's imprisonment mirrors the Reach itself. Ancient violence sealed away, but never truly erased. If this dungeon were to fall unchecked, the Reach would be the first to suffer. And given its fragile state, it might not survive. There are more difficult dungeons in Skyrim mechanically. There are larger ones, more complex ones. But few feel as claustrophobic and tense as Valthuma. The deeper you go, the more deliberate the structure feels. There are no grand open caverns like Blackreach, no sprawling Dwemer machinery, no dramatic waterfalls. Just stone. Stone and silence. The dungeon compresses you as you go. It forces close combat with Dragger Deathlords in narrow hallways. It denies open strategy. It corners you. By the time you reach the ritual chamber, you feel trapped, as though you have descended too far to retreat comfortably. That psychological design makes this dungeon dangerous beyond its enemies. It pressures the player. Most dragon priests persuade power through dragon worship. Hevnerak pursued something colder. His mask's properties suggest a fixation on resisting corruption and decay. He wasn't trying to conquer kingdoms, he was trying to conquer his own biology. That makes him uniquely terrifying. Poison and disease are democratic forces. They do not discriminate. They do not respect power. In a medieval world like Skyrim, plague could wipe out holds. The ancient Nords likely understood that Hevnerak's experiments were not simply heretical. They were existential threats. He was not a warlord. He was a scientist without ethics. And that makes him far more dangerous. Valthuma is deceptive in another way. It is accessible relatively early. There are no level gates, no quest prerequisites demanding high progression. An inexperienced Dragonborn can wander into this dungeon and awaken something far beyond their readiness. And because the ritual is structured as a progression puzzle rather than a clear warning, players not realise the scale of what they're unlocking until it's too late. That subtle trap makes it one of the most dangerous dungeons for unsuspecting adventurers. You think you're clearing a ruin, but you're really breaking a seal. After defeating Hevnarak, you claim his mask, a powerful artifact granting poison immunity and disease resistance. On the surface, it's just loot, but symbolically it represents inheritance. You now carry the legacy of the Plague Priest. You wear the face of a man who experimented with death itself. There's something quietly unsettling about that. Skyrim rarely forces players to confront the morality of the artifacts they collect. But Valthuma lingers. You did what the ancient Nords failed to do permanently. You woke him, and then you ended him. But you also proved that his prison was fragile. What if someone less capable had entered? Many Skyrim dungeons are dangerous because of spectacle. Labyrinthian is epic. Faralhost is tragic. Blackreach is overwhelming. Valthuma is different. Its danger lies in implication. It is a prison barely holding. It is a ritual waiting to be completed. It is a dragon priest obsessed with plague, sealed beneath an already unstable hold. And most players stumble upon it accidentally. That combination, accessibility, narrative depth, atmospheric pressure, and moral implication elevates it above Skyrim's other ruins. It feels less like a dungeon and more like a mistake waiting to happen. When you leave Valthuma, the world continues as normal. Markarth still stands, the Reach still rebels, dragons still roam the skies. But something lingers. You know that beneath the mountains, ancient horrors were not simply buried, they were feared. And you know that if history forgets why a prison was built, someone will eventually open it. Valthuma is not the most famous dungeon, it is not the largest, it does not house the final boss of the game, but it embodies Skyrim's most dangerous truth. Not all ruins are meant to be explored, some are meant to remain sealed. And when curiosity overrides caution, the consequences echo far beyond stone walls. Hevnarak is gone, but the lesson remains. In a land of dragons and war, sometimes the most dangerous enemy is the one that waits quietly beneath your feet. Skyrim is a land built on anticipation. You see a ruin in the distance and imagine ancient secrets hidden beneath its stones. You discover a cave entrance carved into the mountainside and expect danger waiting in the dark. Every location in Skyrim feels like the beginning of a story. Some caves lead to sprawling underground cities. Some contain powerful artifacts. Others hide forgotten lore that expands the entire history of Tamriel. Because of this, players naturally learn to associate caves with reward, discovery, adventure. But every once in a while, Skyrim breaks that expectation. And no location demonstrates that better than Broken Helm Hollow. At first glance, it looks like any other dungeon in the province. A cave entrance carved into the rocky hills south of Riften. A name that sounds dangerous, the promise of bandits, treasure, and hidden secrets. But once you step inside, something becomes clear almost immediately. Broken Helm Hollow is not what you expected. In fact, it might be the most underwhelming cave in all of Skyrim. The first strange thing about Broken Helm Hollow is its name. Broken Helm sounds dramatic. It suggests a battlefield, a fallen warrior, or some forgotten tragedy buried beneath a stone. In a game where location names often hint at deeper lore, places like Bleak Falls Barrow or Labyrinthian, players naturally assume there must be a story here. But Broken Helm Hollow never quite delivers on that promise. The cave sits in the hills south of Riften, tucked quietly between forests and rocky outcrops. It's not particularly hidden, but it's also not along the main roads most players travel. You might discover it while wandering through the rift, or you might only visit it after receiving a Radiant quest. Either way, the entrance gives the impression that something meaningful waits inside. But once you enter the cave, that illusion quickly begins to fade. Like many caves in Skyrim, Broken Helm Hollow is occupied by bandits. Bandits are one of the most common enemy types in the game. They fill forts, caves, ruins, and abandoned towers across the province. And while they can be fun to fight, they rarely create memorable experiences on their own. Broken Helm Hollow is no exception. Inside the cave, players encounter a small group of bandits using the location as a hideout. They've built makeshift camps, placed torches along the cave walls, and scattered supplies throughout the tunnels. It's exactly what you would expect from a standard bandit den. There are no unique enemy types, no unusual combat mechanics, no elaborate traps or puzzles. Just a handful of enemies guarding a cave that feels almost identical to dozens of others across Skyrim. And that's where the first sense of disappointment appears. One of the most memorable aspects of Skyrim's best dungeons is mystery. Bleak Falls Barrow introduces ancient Nordic puzzles and dragon lore. Blackreach reveals a massive underground ecosystem. Even smaller caves often hide journals or environmental storytelling that hints at deeper narratives. Broken Helm Hollow lacks almost all of that. There are no elaborate ruins, no lost civilizations, no strange magical experiments hidden in the shadows. The cave is simply just a cave. Its tunnels twist through stone walls that look nearly identical to countless other locations in the game. Its rooms contain crates, bedrolls, and campfires, the standard decorations of a bandit hideout. Nothing about the environment suggests that anything unusual ever happened here. And without that sense of mystery, the cave begins to feel strangely forgettable. Broken Helm Hollow does include one small narrative detail. Inside the cave, players can find a captive prisoner locked in a cage. It's one of the few places he might be. This prisoner is usually part of a Radiant rescue quest, meaning the game randomly selects the location when an NPC asks you to save someone. At first, this might seem like it might add depth to the cave's story. After all, prisoners imply conflict. Conflict suggests narrative, but in practice, the interaction is extremely simple. You unlock the cage, the prisoner thanks you, and then they leave. There's no elaborate dialogue, no dramatic revelation, no hidden twists that changes how you see the location. The rescue happens quickly and quietly, leaving the cave feeling just as ordinary as it was before. To understand why Broken Helm Hollow feels so underwhelming, it helps to look at Skyrim's Radiant quest system. Bethesda designed Skyrim with hundreds of locations that could be used interchangeably for certain quests. Bandit camps, caves, forts. The game randomly assigns these locations to missions like bounty hunts or rescue operations. This system allows Skyrim to generate endless quests, but it also means that some locations were designed primarily as generic quest spaces rather than unique experiences. Broken Helm Hollow fits perfectly into that category. It exists less as a meaningful place in the world and more as a stage where Radiant quests can occur. A cave designed for functionality rather than storytelling. Even the physical design of Broken Helm Hollow contributes to its reputation. The cave is relatively small. Its layout is straightforward. Players move through a short series of tunnels before reaching the main chamber where the bandit leader resides. After that, the cave just ends. There are no secret passages, no branching paths, no hidden chambers waiting to be discovered. Compared to Skyrim's more complex dungeons, Broken Helm Hollow feels almost unfinished. Not broken in a technical sense, but broken in the sense that it never evolves beyond its simple design. Another reason the cave feels so underwhelming is its rewards. Skyrim often motivates exploration with unique items or valuable treasure. Players enter dangerous ruins hoping to find powerful weapons, enchanted armor, or rare artifacts. But Broken Helm Hollow offers very little in that regard. The bandit leader carries standard equipment. The chests contain typical loot. Nothing about the rewards feel particularly special. Which means that by the time you leave the cave, You may not feel like you've discovered anything meaningful at all. Just another small encounter in a world full of them. Perhaps the biggest problem with Broken Helm Hollow is how easily it disappears from memory. Skyrim is filled with hundreds of locations, and many of them stand out because of something distinctive. A strange puzzle, a dramatic boss fight, a piece of lore that changes how you view the world. Broken Helm Hollow lacks that defining moment. It doesn't surprise you, it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't reveal anything new about Skyrim's history. It simply exists. And in a game as massive as Skyrim, that might be the most dangerous thing a location can do. Because places that don't stand out are the ones players forget entirely. And yet Broken Helm Hollow still teaches us something interesting about Skyrim's design. Even though the cave itself is simple, it contributes to the illusion that Skyrim is a living world. Not every location can be legendary, not every cave can hide ancient secrets. Some places exist simply because people needed somewhere to live, hide, or survive. From that perspective, Broken Helm Hollow begins to make more sense. It isn't meant to be extraordinary, it's meant to feel like a small temporary shelter used by outlaws trying to avoid the law itself. A minor detail in a much larger world. Broken Helm Hollow may never become one of Skyrim's most famous locations. It doesn't contain ancient magic, it doesn't hide powerful artifacts, and it certainly doesn't challenge the Dragonborn in any meaningful way. But in a strange way, that's what makes it interesting, because it reminds us that Skyrim's world is larger than its biggest moments. For every legendary ruin or epic quest, there are dozens of small places quietly filling the spaces between them. Caves used by bandits, shelters forgotten by history, locations that players enter once and then never think about again. Broken Helm Hollow is one of those places, underwhelming, forgettable, but still part of the vast world that makes Skyrim feel real. And sometimes the most ordinary places reveal just as much about a world as the legendary ones.